share in either wisdom, story, or logic. And it's clearly amazing to hear all the differing missing links discovered by people, unique to their own journeys, and in how they have come to discover them. Together, we can help to build a bigger picture for a better future, for a brighter tomorrow. Let's stand united. Let's remove the veils, and let's create a new world together. Are you that missing link? Join Jesse Hale on the Missing Link Talk Show as he helps to unveil the mystery through the unique wisdom and store of others.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome everybody here back to the Missing Link. Today we're excited to talk to a former teacher of elementary, homeless shelters, and group homes who's been teaching about the secret numerical code behind the English language since 2013 and how it pertains to everything from news to markets to sports to elections. And his mission is to help share this knowledge out to the world. Welcome to the Missing Link, Zach. K. Hubbard, how are you doing today, brother?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
You're very, very welcome. So why don't you start off with telling us about yourself, about your journey, a little bit about your background, your education, what part of the world you grew up in, what part of the world you're in now, if you like disclosing that information, what got you into numbers, what woke you up to what's happening in the world, being out of that spell, I guess, which, many people are under. Anything that you wanted to share about yourself and your journey here with our audience, especially if they may be hearing you here for the first time?
Sure. I'm from the Pacific Northwest of the United States. I grew up in Portland, Oregon. That's where I was born. And these days I'm living in Central Washington. Spent a part of my life in college down in Arizona. Had to get out of the rain for a bit before I discovered the eastern side of the Pacific Northwest up here. My whole life just living on the western side of the state. I thought it was just nothing but rain and green up here. And lo and behold, east of the mountains, it's high desert and it's mostly sunny and bright. But what I got into happened when I was 18 years old. I was 18 when 9/11 happened, and it was something that put me on a different path than what I had imagined for myself. I was a freshman in college when September 11th happened. I was going to Arizona State. I was on a scholarship for the accounting program. As we'll get to, I'm a numbers guy, so fittingly, I was in accounting. It wasn't the most exciting thing, but my game plan back then was I was going to go through my undergrad and then get a law degree. Everyone always thought I'd be a lawyer. And my dad even just said the other day, he's like, I'm still surprised you didn't end up as a lawyer. I kind of lost the will or the whatever you want to say to go that path, because when 9/11 happened, no longer was my focus on my own well-being and having a great career and, the materialism that so much of us are focused on when we're younger. And my new focus after 9/11 was finding out what was really going on in this country and what was wrong with my fellow man. Why were they so deceived by the TV screen? Why could they not see through the obvious lie that had taken place that day? And to change something about the path the nation was obviously on, because when 9/11 happened, I just saw how in the snap of fingers, everything changed about our reality for young people. Here we were the year earlier, being recruited by the military and being told it was the best time to ever join because there'd probably never be another war. And all the thoughts they were putting in our head in high school are so funny to look back at. I remember my science teacher telling us we were going to be the healthiest, longest living generation there ever was. We'd probably all live to be over 100 years old. And now look, I mean, humanity's life expectation is shrinking for the first time in X amount of years. We're going backwards. So everything is so much different than from when I graduated in high school in June of 2001. But coming back to that day, September 11th, I started to realize there was some kind of number ritual taking place, with the most obvious thing being a national emergency on 911. And I thought, 911, really? National emergency? And again, we've talked about this before, Jesse, but I started looking at things back then, and I noticed right away, I said, what are the odds of these things? 911 was made the national emergency dialing code in 1968. World Trade Center construction began in New York in 1968. George W. Bush, the sitting president at the time, graduated from Yale and Skull and Bones in 68. And again, a host of other things that fit in with the ritual, including 2001: A Space Odyssey coming out that year. But looking into that is what got me on the path that I'm now on, and in doing the research about numbers. And I was raised Lutheran, for people who don't know, and of course Lutheran's a branch of Christianity named after Martin Luther, who led the Protestant Reformation. But something that always bothered me as a child in Sunday school and studying the Bible was no one had an explanation for all of the very specific numbers that are throughout the Bible. And the fourth book of the Bible is titled Numbers. And just being somebody who's always been numbers oriented, I've always had a fascination with numbers since I was a child. I always just wondered why, like, where is the answer to this? So, but from that at a young age to then 9/11, this big number ritual. Again, for people who've overlooked it, New York is the 11th state in order of statehood. The World Trade Centers look like a massive 11. Of course, the attack happened on the 11th of the month. They told you the first plane that hit the towers was A11. 11 years earlier to the day, George Herbert Walker Bush, the father of the sitting president at the time, had given the speech about a new world order, a world free or a tear. So again, for a long time, I looked at this and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Okay, 11's the master number in numerology. I guess they unfolded the master plan. But eventually, I found this book right here. I actually found an excerpt from this book before I got the book online in doing research. And Manly P. Hall talks about how, in Hebrew and ancient Greek, there used to be a number code behind the language. And then he lays down one cipher in the book for the English language and says he doesn't know how much merit there is to it, but puts it on the reader's hands to investigate it. And the cipher he puts in the book, for we're getting to what I'm on. Again, I'm really into this Kabbalistic study of letters and numbers, which is called Gematria. Gematria, the practice of coding numbers into words, also pronounced Gematria. But he put in there one cipher in his book for the English language. It's the alphabetic order, so A is 1 up to Z, the 26th letter is 26, with numerology applied. So A's 1, B's 2, C's 3. Where it changes is when you get to J, the 10th letter. The numerology of 10 is 1 plus 0 is 1. So J becomes 1. K, the 11th letter, becomes 1 plus 1 is 2. Up to Z, the 26th letter, becomes 2 plus 6 is 8. So I started with that cipher and I started to look into things. And, I'd always noticed how from 1968, when the plan went into motion for essentially, all the things in 1968 that came to a point in 2001 with the attack, I noticed that was 33 years later. And the thing I knew about 33 is it's the highest degree of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which has their headquarters in D.C. And so taking that cipher that Manly P. Hall has in his book, I noticed right away that the phrase masonry equals 33. The word secrecy equals 33. The word order equals 33. The word federal equals 33. And D.C. is known as the Masonic City. And again, Masonry gets their symbolism or their significance in 33 from human beings in the 33 bones of the human vertebrae. They study something called Kundalini, which is about spiritual ascension up the 33 bones of the vertebrae. And funny enough, in the same cipher, people's 33 and persons 33. And what's interesting is in numerology, with an asterisk, some numerologists say this isn't pure. In all numerology, it's recognized that 11 is the master number and 22 is the master builder number. Some sects of numerology refer to 33 as the master teacher number. And funny enough, in that same cipher, teacher's 33. And I've noticed just all throughout history, 9/11, things that happened before it, like the Rodney King beating on 3-3. Another good 33 word in that cipher is police. Police is 33. The police beat Rodney King on 3-3, setting off riots in L.A. And, of course, there's the Fraternal Order of Police, which is Masonic. So I started to look at that list, and I said, well, all of these things really do fit together nice and tightly. And again, the Masons historically were builders. These massive structures in New York come down 33 years after construction begins. And you have, Bush in office, who's part of this Masonic order, Skull and Bones. And by the way, the alumni of Skull and Bones are referred to as bonesmen, which in the same cipher is 33. So when I found that book and that excerpt from it in 2013, right away I found all that, and I just started to go back and look at stories and history, and I just noticed how many 33s were really there. I'd always noticed the pattern, but then once I became aware of it, it just became hyper aware. And it's amazing if you pay attention to news propaganda, mass shootings. They love to throw this 33 number out there. Like we were just saying, the Rodney King beating on 3-3 by the police that set off these riots. The George Floyd thing that happened more recently is the closest thing to Rodney King. And they had to tell you right at the beginning that the rioting in Minneapolis started on 33rd Street. And so anyhow, that was my beginning. And I'm going to let you ask me another question because I know I told you today I'd really like to talk about the election in light of it being the big focus here in the States. But I'm happy to answer all the questions you have along the way too, Jesse. So I'll hand it back over.
I think it would be important to tell people how, like, see, here's Gematria 32 says Freemason 33, Order 33, Secrecy 33. How do you get 33? Like, what does that mean when it says Masonry equals 33? Why does it equal 33? Is it just somehow made up, or is there some kind of math that goes along in order to get all these different words to, like, COP 33? How does COP, it doesn't have a lot of letters like Masonry. How does that equal, both equal 33?
I think the COP might be a mistake. I don't think COP does equal 33. Yeah, again, so I was trying to explain this. I guess I didn't say it very clearly, but again, the cipher that Manly P. Hall gives for the English language in his book, I can even put it up on the screen if the visual's more helpful. Hold on, I'm going to turn here. I think it's on page 64 if I'm not mistaken.
And maybe you did say it. I've been trying to deal with the comments, and there's a couple people here that really don't like you, so I've been having to figure out.
I got haters everywhere I go. That's what happens when you expose what's really going on in the world like no one else ever has. But again, if you can make that out, this cipher, A up to Z, the alphabet.
Up a little bit, up a little bit, Okay, so every letter would be a certain number then.
Exactly. So, like, case in point, with the word masonry, M is the 13th letter of the alphabetic order. So 13 in numerology is 1 plus 3 is 4. So M becomes 4 in that cipher. A is the first letter, so it's 1. S is the 19th letter. 19 in numerology is 1 plus 9 is 10. 10 is 1 plus 0 is 1. So S becomes 1. O, the 15th letter is 1 plus 5 is 6. You follow me, right? Making each letter a single digit number, then you add up the words. So masonry becomes 33. Like order, like secrecy, like federal, like, again, police, as in the fraternal order of police. And for the record, the word Mason alone, without the R-Y at the end, Mason alone is 17. The House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., the headquarters for the Scottish Rite, again, the highest degree of the Scottish Rite's 33. The address for that building is 1733. And on the outside, there's 33 columns that are each 33 feet tall. And the thing about the 17 part is modern Freemasonry was created in the year 1717. And a lot of the founders to this nation, which was established in 1776, were Masons. But the thing about 1776 is it's 59 years after 1717, and 59 is the 17th prime number. And if you look into the original study of this in the Hebrew alphabet, where every letter is known to be a number, again, it's about finding those word pairings that have logical relationships with matching numerical value. And also prime number relationships are very much a part of that study. So I was reading about all these things in the early days and then just applied the same type of, reasoning and logic to English. And lo and behold, things just really started to add up. And for the first 3 years that I did this research from 2013 to 2016, the two ciphers that we were looking at were the alphabetic order without numerology applied and the alphabetic order with numerology. Manly P. Hall does bring both of those ciphers up in his book, but he only lists out the one with the visual like I just showed you. And 3 years into it, we got the idea to think about what Aleister Crowley had said, because Aleister Crowley has written several books about gematria, and he always said you have to do everything forwards and backwards. So we got the bright idea to run the alphabetic order in reverse. and in reverse with numerology, it's doing the exact same thing in reverse. And we realized it really was the other half of the code. The word Freemasonry, when you run the alphabetic order in reverse with numerology applied, is 59, which again is the 17th prime, going with the pattern of 1717 to 1776. And, case in point, Pope Francis right now, the first Jesuit Pope. If you look up the photo of him before he's the Pope, he has a photo on the internet doing the hidden hand, which is a Masonic pose where you tuck your hand inside your vest. I can't do it because I have a T-shirt on, but that's a well-known Masonic pose. Pope Francis equates to 58 forwards. When you run the alphabetic order in reverse, or excuse me, I misspoke. His name equals 59 forwards, 58 in reverse. Freemasonry is the exact opposite. It's 58 forwards, 59 in reverse. But the thing about Pope Francis is, if you look into his history, he became a Jesuit in 1958. And modern Freemasonry is a Jesuit creation. It was created by the Jesuits in the banking district of London. And the city of London, of course, is divided into 33 neighborhood areas. But Pope Francis became a Jesuit in 58. And 59 is very important to Pope Francis because Benedict stepped down on the 59th day of the year to make way for Pope Francis. And then more recently, we had the 59th U.S. presidential election in the U.S., and we knew it was lock city for Joe Biden. I don't think there was anyone else online that thought Joe Biden was going to become the president, but we were explaining well before he became president why it was going to be him. JFK was the only Catholic president in the U.S. before Joe Biden. And, of course, JFK was number 35, killed at age 46. And, of course, he was killed along Interstate 35 in Dallas, number 35 was. But the word Catholic has gematria of 35 in the same cipher we talked about from the book. But when you run it in reverse, Catholic equals 46. Like there's 46 books in the Catholic Old Testament. JFK was number 35, killed at age 46. The first Catholic, when, again, Catholic is 35. 35 and 46, forwards and backwards. What we noticed about the 59th U.S. presidential election, which Joe Biden won, is that Election Day, November 3rd, was exactly 46 weeks after the Pope's birthday, and Inauguration Day would fall on, well, it has every year because Pope's is the same birthday, but Inauguration Day is on the 35th day of the Pope's age. So perfect ritual for Joe Biden, the Catholic, to come in there as number 46. And then the other kicker is, just like how Pope Francis equals 59, so does John F. Kennedy, the name that he goes by in the history books. They always have his middle initial on there, John F. Kennedy, 59. So in the 59th election, we get the parallel, the nation's second Catholic president, perfectly synced with the first Jesuit Pope. And there's a lot more we could say about that, including why Beau Biden died at age 46. But I'm going to let you ask the next question.
Well, talk about the election on, is this going to happen? Are we going to have an election? Some people say it's not. Some people say Trump's still president. Some people, what's your thoughts on this whole illusion that, they're trying to perpetrate on all of us?
Yeah, again, the illusion or the delusion or whatever you want to refer to it as is the two-party system that so many people are caught up in. Again, it really is two wings of the same bird. And really the only purpose of the system is just to keep people divided and fighting amongst themselves and having false hope in a system that sold them out long ago. So the upcoming election, we've been talking about this for a long, long time. And it matters a whole lot that Donald Trump is about to turn 78 years old. I'm trying to decide if that's the right part to start about this, but you know what? Let's just start there. Donald Trump will turn 78, June 14th. He has the same birthday as the U.S. flag. Trump, that word is associated with tarot cards. The top cards in the deck are the tarot cards. There's 22 Trump cards, and then there's 56 of the lesser arcana. And again, 78 cards, Trump about to be 78. The election is on the very special day to the Jesuits. Remember the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes Day. That's the day the Jesuits tried to blow up British Parliament because they didn't like that King James was putting out a Bible in English. And anyhow, coming back to Trump being 78. And again, just 56 is another number that goes with Trump cards. Like that day leaves 56 days left in the year, November 5th. But the thing about Trump being 78 years old, here's the other important piece. There's two interesting narratives about former presidents that fit in with 78. The first one is Grover Cleveland. Trump had his 2016 convention in Cleveland, the year that he won, and he did that right after LeBron won the NBA Finals on the real King James's birthday, playing for the Cavaliers when they call LeBron King James. Again, for people who don't get the joke, King James's son was King Charles, and those who fought for King Charles in the English Civil War were Cavaliers. So anyway, right after that finals, and notice LeBron became 4-6 in finals right before Joe Biden became number 46. These things aren't an accident. They're all scripted together. Same secret societies are controlling it all. Your rigged elections, your rigged sports league, your daily rigged news. You learn this knowledge, you'll see right through it all.
Just hang on. When you say it's not an accident, it's all scripted.
Mhm.
How is it all scripted? Like, do they literally have script writers, think tanks, and they're going to say, we're going to do this on this event? Like, does this
no doubt about it. Just no doubt about it. No doubt about it. We brought a lot of attention to this. And it's not an accident that the last couple of years, the NFL's advertising campaign's been about how scripted the games are as they like try to make fun of what's the absolute undeniable truth. So yeah, literally scripted and no doubt script writers. And for people who can't comprehend that, it's really easy to comprehend. I mean, how many different TV sitcoms are on today that have a gazillion writers for them? And we're talking about worldwide. How many different shows are just going to air today and then tomorrow? Think about how many people are out there writing stories and creating ongoing stories that are broadcast, every day. Some of these shows once a week. Again, it's no different when it comes to the news. If you want to look into something funny, there's a show from the 60s in the UK called The Newsbenders. And this guy gets hired to write the news for 5 years from now. And he's like, what do you mean to write the news from 5 years from now? He's like, oh, let me tell you over here what we've been up to for all this time. And you guys, these things might be in sitcoms and TV shows, but they are poking at the truth of what's going on in this world. And here, just to make a point about that, Donald Trump, go back and look up this old episode of Suddenly Susan. Suddenly Susan, the old sitcom in the U.S., there's an episode that debuted on May 8th, way back in the early 90s. May 8th, 5/8, many years before Donald Trump announced from his 58-story Trump Tower that he'd run for the 58th U.S. presidential election before winning and then hiring the 58-year-old Steve Ray for Inauguration Day. Remember, Freemasonry equals 58. So does secret society. So does Solomon's Temple. All of Freemasonry's secrets are in Solomon's Temple, according to their lore. But the first degree of Freemasonry is the honored apprentice. So think about Donald Trump being the apprentice on a sitcom show. And then an episode of, I didn't even make the point about Suddenly Susan. Go back to the Suddenly Susan episode with Donald Trump from May 8th, where he's talked about as the president of the United States. I mean, this is nearly 30 years before he became president. They had to put out an episode on 5/8 talking about him as the president. On top of that, Donald Trump back in 88, he did an interview with Oprah Winfrey. I think it was the first time it was ever brought up, the idea of Donald Trump being the president. Oprah asked him if he would like to be the president someday. Well, Oprah Winfrey equals 58. If you just take the alphabetic order, Trump equals 88. That was in 88, that interview with Oprah, where she asked him if he'd like to be the president someday, and they talked about it at length. But all of these were the signs all along the way where Donald Trump was going to. This scripted Hollywood actor who runs on Make America Great Again, just like Ronald Reagan, who was a Hollywood actor before he became the 33rd governor of California and then the president. And again, it's just par for the course. It's history repeating itself. So I was talking about the significance of Donald Trump being 78. And there's a number of things I want to say about Trump in this election. So the name Cleveland, as in Grover Cleveland, and also the city where he had his convention, Cleveland has a gematria value of 78 when you just take the alphabetic order. 78. Donald Trump will turn again 78, and he's trying to become the nation's second split-term president. Only Grover Cleveland had a split term. Grover Cleveland was the nation's 22nd president, and he was the 24th president. And here we are in 2024, and Trump officially announced that he was running for this election at the end of 2022. And you might recall he got a lot of criticism for that because everyone said, why is he doing it right now? This is too early to announce for 2024. This isn't when we do these things. Why is he doing this right now? We were all over it because we've been talking about Trump turning 78 and becoming the next Grover Cleveland for a long time. Again, all of these things are number rituals. And the other big 78 piece is Kennedy. The name Kennedy equals 78. And, you have a Kennedy in the race right now. You have RFK Jr., and we'll talk about his entrance into the race. Now, it paid tribute to his dead uncle and also his dead father. But the name Kennedy equals 78. And if you go back to 2016, 3 days before Trump won the election, November 5th, which will be the day of the election this year, Trump supposedly survived an assassination in Nevada. And, earlier that year when he was running for office, there was the Trump tombstone story, the mystery of who put a tombstone of Trump in Central Park, that he had died. And they put on the tombstone, "Made America Hate Again." That was a big story at the time. So they're laying down all these little narratives. And, you can tell that they know that Donald Trump is a very polarizing person. He's a love him or hate him person. There's a gentleman that I met a couple years back, and his name is Adam Francisco, and he pretends to be a big Trumper, and he's out there in Florida, and he's just trying to get people's reactions by waving around his Trump flag every day. You can check out his channel on YouTube, Adam Francisco. But he loves getting off on how much people love him for it and how much people hate him. He's getting off on all the energy. And, I tried to talk to him a couple years ago about, how rigged the system is. And the thing that's sad about this is not to call him out. Well, I am going to call him out because it's wrong what he's doing. He's not even really a Trump person. He's just doing it because he knows it brings in revenue and people donate to him, and he likes the show. I mean, there's a lot of people like this that are frauds in the world that just do something because it makes them money and gives them a good time. But yeah, he's getting off on the divisiveness of a Donald Trump. And anyway, Donald Trump and the 78 thing. Let's come back to the other piece, and then we'll talk about, we'll come back to the Kennedys and when RFK got in the race. But the word Jesuit equates to 78. And Donald Trump is Jesuit educated, as is Joe Biden. And a lot of big 78 rituals with the Jesuits throughout history. By the way, with regards to there being 78 tarot cards in the deck, we know the Catholic Church has hoarded knowledge and information, and they keep a lot of it archived away in their sealed bunker. But if you look into tarot cards, the oldest remaining tarot deck in the world, tarot certainly didn't start in Italy, but the oldest known tarot deck in the world goes back to Italy. And again, it's because all roads lead to Rome. But Donald Trump with the Jesuit education, it's also why the 78 matters. And, one of those Jesuit Masonic mottos is order out of chaos, which is another 78. So anyhow, again, we're getting to the significance of why Trump turning 78 really matters this year. Let's not forget that when he became president the first time around, the big hit show on Netflix was House of Cards, fitting in with the whole Trump tarot cards ritual. But yeah, this election will be the 60th U.S. presidential election. And the elections that happened in 1860 and 1960 were fateful elections. Lincoln was assassinated after being elected in 1860. And of course, he blamed the Civil War on the U.S. The U.S. Civil War on the Jesuit order. For people who are not aware of that, look into what Lincoln said about the Jesuits being the source of the U.S. Civil War. He said he wasn't aware when the war began, but he learned as it went on who was really pulling the strings and that it was Rome. And it goes with how certain founders were very much worried about what would happen if the Jesuits came out of suppression when this country was being founded. This country, the United States, was founded in the time of the Jesuit suppression. And I'll bring up the point about where a familiar pattern fits in with the Jesuit suppression ending in the time of James Madison and the day it did end. But again, the 1860 election ended up eventually with the assassination of Lincoln. The 1960 election of JFK ended up with his assassination. So now we have the 60th presidential election in U.S. history. And the thing about the Jesuits is they began with 60 original members, and the word order itself equals 60. And recently, we had the first ever Jesuit Ignatian year. It began on May 20th, which is the 500th anniversary. When it started, it was the 500th anniversary of the Jesuit founder, Ignatius of Loyola, being shot with a cannonball. And there's always big jokes on May 20th with the history of Ignatius of Loyola being shot with a cannonball. Case in point, Donald Trump will be in court this year on May 20th with Judge Eileen Cannon. And anyhow, the Jesuit Ignatian year ran from May 20th, 2021 to July 31st, 2022. So it ran more than a typical calendar year. It ended on the day in history that Ignatius of Loyola died, the anniversary of his death. And the way they capped off that year was with the death of Bill Russell, who was Jesuit educated, basketball star at the University of San Francisco, who played for the Boston Celtics. And of course, he died right after the San Francisco basketball team beat the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals. And for people who aren't aware, Joe Biden's Secret Service name is Celtic, and he announced he was running for president 17 days after John Havlicek, number 17 of the Celtics, died. Again, I don't want to get caught up in this, but again, this is how you can see that everything's scripted together, from the rigged NBA to the rigged elections, and you can see that the same cabal is controlling it all, because stuff like this is happening all the time if you pay attention, as we've been demonstrating and calling things out before they happen for a decade. But okay, the 60th U.S. presidential election, the history of 60 and the Jesuits beginning with a 60-member order. Exactly 60 weeks into the Jesuit Ignatian year was July 14th, 2022, and 3 stories happened that day in this order. The first story that day was Donald Trump said he will be running for the next election, which was the 60th. The second story that came out that day was a 72-page report by conservatives against Trump based on 60 legal cases became the big news story. So that was the second story that day, but again, based on 60 legal cases, exactly 60 weeks into the Jesuit Ignatian year. And then the third story that day was Donald Trump's ex-wife fell down the stairs and died. And that was 45 years after they got married. 45 years after they got married, like he was number 45. And let's not forget, they called him as the 45th president-elect in the early hours of November 9th, which was the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall. And Berlin Wall equals 45. We're talking about how it's based on the alphabetic order forwards and backwards. The word ritual equals 27 forwards, 45 in reverse. Donald Trump, who ran on building a wall, called the president-elect on the 27th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, which equals 45. And not to mention, he ran on MAGA, like Ronald Reagan, who told Gorbachev to tear down that same wall, right? So just kind of like, just a big historical joke. And here's an even bigger joke for people who don't know. The highest degree of the Church of Satan is the 5th degree, and it's called MAGA, M-A-G-A. And for people who don't know, the Church of Satan, the highest tenet of Satanism is to worship yourself, egotism. So just think about that in light of Donald Trump, Mr. MAGA, Mr. Ego. And think about that in light of this nation. And now also think about that in light of the Republican Party. And don't think I'm siding with the Democrats, but the reason I say the Republican Party is because in 2000, just before Bush became president, the second Bush, the Republicans changed the stars on their elephant logo. Before it was an upward pointing star, 5-pointed star. They changed it in 2000 to a downwards pointing 5-pointed star. And a downwards pointing 5-pointed star is associated with the Church of Satan. That's, a downwards pointing pentagram is a satanic symbol. So, I mean, you just think about the symbolism right in front of everybody's face, and they know, most people don't have any of this in their consciousness, so they don't see it. It's right in front of their face, but they don't know what they're looking at. And, okay, so again, coming back to this 60 thing with Donald Trump, his ex-wife falling down the stairs and dying on the day of all of these election-related things before the 60th upcoming election. Donald Trump in Gematria equals 60. Okay? So this big, huge climax, all of these things going on right now. Here, let me tell you the importance of forwards and backwards. Okay. President Trump and President Biden, when you run it forwards, both President Trump and President Biden equals 72. Keep in mind, Jesuit order also equates to 72. And we got the first Jesuit Pope, Pope Francis, on the 72nd day of the year, March 13th, 2013. The Jesuits are a sun cult. The sun moves 1 degree on the astrological wheel every 72 years. 72 demons in the Goetia, 72 names of God in Kabbalah. The number has significance, 72. So this year, 2024, on the 72nd day of the year, again, we saw this coming from a mile away, both President Biden and President Trump secure the nominations for their respective parties. They become the official nominees. President Biden, President Trump, both 72. That's when you run the alphabetic order forwards. When you run the alphabetic order in reverse, both President Biden and President Trump equate to 81. 81. Joe Biden supposedly got 81 million votes. He's from Scranton, Pennsylvania, off Interstate 81. He's 81 years old right now. Today, the day we're doing this interview, today's date numerology, one of the paths is 72. You get that by adding March 3 plus the 25th of the month, 25, plus the year 2024 as 3 plus 25 plus 20 plus 24, which is 72. And today is 81 days before Trump's upcoming birthday. Again, President Trump, 7281. Today, Donald Trump, huge climax in the story. Doesn't have enough money to pay bond. He's going to have to forfeit assets. Maybe Trump Tower, maybe the same one where he announced he was running for the 58th election from. Again, all of this stuff is high drama and ritual, and you see what it does. Like I said, my guy Adam Francisco, who pretends to be a Trump guy because it brings in good money on YouTube, he's out there and, he's getting the reactions from people. Some people are loving this. Some people are hating it. Again, they know that all of these storylines totally manipulate the people who are so invested in these rigged, staged elections and these sold-out political parties. And they know that this kind of stuff just brings it to a greater climax. We're going to have to get into January 6th, but I want to rewind to something else. Again, we were talking about the 78s and where the Grover Cleveland part is with Trump trying to become the second Grover Cleveland. By the way, Grover Cleveland had a mail-order bride from the same part of the world as Melania. Overweight guy. A lot of parallels between Trump and Grover Cleveland. But again, the other part of that 78 was Kennedy. And, of course, 2 Kennedys had been assassinated. One was on the campaign trail in 68, and the other was in office in 63, November 22nd. So RFK Jr., he officially filed his paperwork to get in the race last year, April 5th, 2023. So we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of RFK Jr. officially getting in the race. Now, the thing about the day he filed was it was 144 days after the leader of the Jesuits' birthday. The leader of the Jesuits is known as the Black Pope or the Superior General. The current Superior General is Arturo Sosa. And from his November 12th birthday to RFK Jr. getting in the race, again, 144 days later. If you just take the alphabetic order, Jesuit order equates to 144. No numerology applied, just ABC 1, 2, 3 up to Z is 26. Jesuit orders 144. Now, they say in history that RFK's father died at 1:44 a.m. That's the official time of his death, 1:44 a.m. And just so you can get a feel for, again, how these ciphers are so important, Robert Kennedy equates to 156 with the alphabetic order. He was shot on the 156th day of the year. Robert Kennedy with numerology applied equals 66, like how he died on June 6th. And Sirhan in the same cipher equals 66. But they had to report that he died at 1:44 a.m. Now, JFK, he died in Dealey Plaza, named after a Mason. JFK met with the Pope that year on July 2nd. And you can look up his meeting, or his wife also met with the Pope for 33 minutes. That's how it goes down in the history books, that his wife had a separate meeting for 33 minutes. And by the way, Kennedy's another one of those words wherewith we began with the most pure cipher in Manly B. Hall's book, Kennedy's 33. There's a story right now on the front page of CNN about an island that people vacation to because of the Kennedys and pay $33,000 a night. And they say that whole legacy comes from the Kennedys. Again, you pay attention to this knowledge, you can just spot stuff every day. But anyway, JFK met with the Pope on July 2nd, which can be written 7-2. Again, Jesuit Order 72. From the day JFK met with the Pope to the day he was assassinated was a span of 144 days. Jesuit Order has the 144. When numerology is applied, it has the 72. Lincoln, who blamed the Civil War on the Jesuits, was shot on 14/4, a lot like 144. Last year, if you go to this last year's headlines, August 9th is the day leaving 144 days left in the year. The first story they put out that day was that Joe Biden had an assassination scare from a man in Utah who wanted to kill him. And then later that day, at the end of the day, the news broke that down in South America, a person running for office, and I want to say it was in Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and double check. It was a South American nation, but a presidential candidate was assassinated that day on the day leaving 144 days left in the year. And then adding insult to injury, he was shot 63 days from his birthday, like JFK in 63. And also recently we had the drummer for the Dead Kennedys die at 63. And nobody even blinks an eye at this stuff, but it's just like, come on, man. The Dead Kennedys drummer just drops dead at 63. Like, how much fluoride is in everybody? Doesn't anybody just snap out of it and go, well, wait a minute, that seems weird? I mean, you just pay attention, just weird stuff's happening every day and almost no one's blinking an eye. So, okay, this 144 thing goes with the Jesuits. And by the way, here's another great 144. President Biden, with just the alphabetic order, is 144. And look into this for everyone who doesn't know. Look up the Transition Integrity Project of June 12th, 2020. It was simulated by Georgetown. They simulated the U.S. presidential election. And in the simulation, which, again, the simulation was 144 days before the election, November 3rd. But in the simulation, Joe Biden narrowly beats Trump. Trump feels that he's cheated, so he refuses to step down, which leads to a deadly confrontation between Americans in the country. That was all simulated at Georgetown 144 days before the election. And think about what happened after the election. We had January 6th. And I'll talk a bit about January 6th and this upcoming Civil War movie that's coming out. But before we get to that, I just want to see if you have any questions since I've been talking for a while.
Well, it seems like it's 144 right now where you're at.
Well, I must have looked up a half second late. It just ticked up to 145 out here, but I must have just missed it.
One question, when you say you're doing it frontwards and backwards and it comes out to a different number, I'm not, that doesn't, can you make me comprehend
backwards,
that?
Backwards just means going backwards. Z becomes 1, A becomes 26. Just doing the alphabetical order in reverse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes I don't make things clear enough, but that's what backwards is, just doing the alphabetic order in reverse.
Yeah, and it might have been like I've got so many things. We got like, I don't know, 160 people here, and the comments a lot up. I had to, block a few people just because they were out of control on insults and stuff. And like, I don't mind you challenging, I don't mind you questioning anybody, but when all you're doing here is insulting, that's not anything that kind of energy that we want to have here. How much in advance do you think that they're pre-planning? Like, there's stuff in like the 90s on The Simpsons that happened, 10, 20, 30, 40 years later. So how much does this get pre-planned, get scripted? And then how much does, people's will, change the script where they're going to have to rewrite things, that won't come into, perfect scriptural numerical order for them?
Okay. So here's my example of how far things could be planned out. Do you recall that the Lord of the Rings books became very popular movies around the time of 9/11? One of those books in the series is called The Two Towers. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
That book came out right as World War II was ending. And do you know what day it came out on?
World War II was ending?
That's when that book was published, around that time, at the time of World War II ending.
Oh, I didn't know it went that far back.
Yeah, they're old. But it was published on November 11th, 11/11, right? to go with all those 11s on 9/11. Again, New York, the 11th state, the buildings look like an 11, flight AA11, 11 years to the day. Bush gives a speech about how the New World Order will be realized. Again, 11's the master number in numerology. We're talking about that. That was clearly a master plan. That date changed the world as we know it. It changed America as we know it. We now, people were no longer so much worried about their rights and liberties. They were more worried about being kept safe from terrorist boogeymen that could pop out of a cave anywhere, as the media had us trying to believe. But yeah, I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that's an accident that book came out and was published on 11/11, and it was a popular movie series at the time of those attacks. And again, to remind people of two of the biggest movies before 9/11 happened, if you weren't alive back then, two of the biggest movies, and they were just huge, and they came out not long before 9/11. You had The Matrix come out. And since they came out, now the directors of that movie are the Wachowski sisters, which are signs of the times. But Neo's passport in that movie is September 11th, or his birthday in the movie. You can see, or wait a minute, I have to go back and double check if it's his birthday or it's the expiration date on the passport. But they show it right on the screen. It's September 11th, so you got that with Neo. And then the other big movie around that time was Fight Club, and that movie ends with towers collapsing in free fall. And the thing, part about Fight Club is that the author who wrote the book, he's from Seattle. And I always make the point about how important Seattle is to 9/11, because all of the planes supposedly involved in the attack were Boeings, and Boeing was founded by a member of Yale Skull and Bones, just like George Walker Bush was a member of Yale Skull and Bones. And then Magnus and Klemenkic Associates, who helped build the towers in New York, is a construction firm out of Seattle. And then also, other big point, the man who designed the World Trade Centers was a Japanese American out of Seattle. And again, the joke is that they called 9/11 the new Pearl Harbor. Buildings 1, 2, and 7 fell in New York City, like Pearl Harbor's December 7th, 1, 2, 7. And then you had kamikaze pilots, just like you did in Pearl Harbor, Japanese. And then you got this Japanese American who designed the towers. And then we were talking about how all those things happened in 1968, World Trade Center construction, 9/11 being made the code, Bush getting out of college, Yale Skull and Bones, or 2001: A Space Odyssey coming out. Planet of the Apes came out in 1968, and the protagonist in that movie discovers in the end of the film that he's in a destroyed New York. But Seattle, Washington in Gematria equals 68, being such a connected city to the 9/11 attack, if you're really paying attention. And, of course, another big 68 word is terror. And another big 68 word, when you run the alphabetic order in reverse, the letters CIA are 68, and that's where Papa Bush was in 1968 at the CIA. And here's another good one. They called 9/11 Ground Zero after it happened, and the only definition for Ground Zero before 9/11 happened was the point above or below ground where an atomic, hydrogen, or nuclear bomb exploded, and that terminology came out of the Manhattan Project. And, of course, the World Trade Centers were in Manhattan, but using this gematria code, nuclear energy equals 68, nuclear weapon equals 68. And I just talked about this yesterday on my own stream. But, again, I always remind people, Bill Clinton had just become president when the 93 World Trade Center bombing happened. And at the same time that the 93 World Trade Center bombing happened is when Bill Clinton ended nearly 50 years of underground nuclear, hydrogen and atomic bomb detonations. They'd been experimenting underground with detonating these massive bombs for almost 50 years. And by the way, for the record, atomic bomb equals 93. So does Japan, like how we dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. And by the way, what day did we drop it on Hiroshima? The 6th day of the 8th month, August 6th, 6/8. Like nuclear energy, nuclear weapons, 68. Like all this plan going into motion in 68. But yeah, this is what I mean. You learn this knowledge and you can really piece together what they're doing. Case in point, the last pilot to be part of the bombing crew for Japan, that headline came out in the early days of this research, around 2013, 2014, 2015. But the last pilot involved in that bombing died at age 93. So anyway, the point I'm making is the 93 World Trade Center bombing, the story was that the terrorists screwed up. They planted the charges the wrong way. And had they done it right, they probably would have took down the towers, but they said the charges were facing into the ground, so they blew massive craters underneath the World Trade Centers, and then they spent the better part of the next year working under the World Trade Centers. Again, my conspiracy theory is that, well, they'd been testing for nearly 50 years with massive bombs underground. You have to ask, what were they trying to figure out? Is it very possible that they'd figured it out and then they brought it back to Manhattan and planted the specific charges there under the World Trade Centers with a countdown to September 11th, 2001? Because again, what no one should be able to deny is what happened to those buildings. Again, only 3 steel frame buildings have ever collapsed in history from fires, and they all fell on September 11th, 2001 at the World Trade Center site. And for all the people like, but a plane hit it. Well, ask yourself how the Empire State Building still stands, because the Empire State Building was hit by an even bigger plane at the end of World War II that accidentally crashed into it. It didn't collapse. They put out the fire and the building stood. But not only did the World Trade Centers collapse, they turned to dust as they collapsed. They turned into a big cloud of dust that went all over the city, and a lot of people got really sick and died not long after, and people are still dying from the sickness that they inherited from that day. And we've always been told that when you blast those big bombs, you better be a long way away, because they put off all kinds of harmful contaminants and radiation. And I think that's exactly what we're witnessing with the aftermath and the many deaths connected to 9/11 in New York City. And to me, the whole story just fits together like a perfect glove, especially when you know the gematria and you understand the numerical significance of it all.
Could they have potentially planned to take down the towers when they built them in 68?
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Here's another thing to look into. If you look into when those towers are being built, nobody in New York City wanted those towers, but there was one family that really wanted those towers, and they spearheaded the project, and that was the Rockefeller family. And I'm trying to think of the guy who put out the film Freedom to Fascism, who died in recent history. But he have you seen that film, Freedom to Fascism?
No, I don't think so.
I can't think of the guy's name right now, but he says in that film that he was friends with the Rockefellers, and he said I forget which specific Rockefeller, but he says that he told him to be aware of what was coming 9/11. He said he wasn't real specific with him, but he knew that something was coming that day, and he gave him the heads up on it. Aaron Russo, I see it in the chat. That's right. Aaron Russo, Freedom to Fascism. For the record, the name Rockefeller, with just the most simple cipher, equals 110. That's how tall the World Trade Centers were, 110 stories tall. And 110 in numerology is 110, which is another 11 to go with all the 11s on the day. And I'll give you another 110. Osama Bin Laden equates to 110 in the same way Rockefeller does, just taking the alphabetic order, no numerology applied. And just with regards to Osama, his birthday is March 10th. And the biggest act of Middle Eastern plane terrorism before 9/11 was Pan Am 103, like how his birthday can be written 10/3. By the way, Osama bin Laden, he got sent to a very exclusive private school in 68 in Saudi Arabia. And that's the same year the lead hijacker, Muhammad Atta, was born. He was one of 19 hijackers, and the Quran code was discovered in 68 that says the Quran's centered on the number 19. And it's not an accident that COVID-19 came 19 years later. And we can talk about why Thomas Jefferson later said there should be a revolution every 19 years, if you remind me. But the point I want to make about Osama bin Laden is, again, let's put the 4 base ciphers of the English language in context and understand how important they are. So, World Trade Center, as I say it out loud, I can think of 3 of the 4 values right now off the top of my head for World Trade Center. Hold on, give me 1 second to type it out here, because I'm trying to remember what the 4th value is so I can hit them all.
All good. And the reason why I was asking that is because we just had Brian Stavely on last week, and he was showing pictures of the World Trade Center with the sun shining right through it. And a lot of the towers, there was nothing even in them. So it's almost, he was saying it's like, because that's why there wasn't a lot of rubble, because a lot of, inside of the towers wasn't even occupied. And they're trying to say that, and he was saying that, he believes that it was built, for them to take it down. So it's interesting that you say that. Maybe even in 68, that's when they had planned, for this to come down at one point.
There's no doubt it was planned. Again, just way too many things happened in 1968. I forgot to make the point about how nobody wanted the World Trade Centers. If you look into why no one wanted the World Trade Centers, is because landlords at the time in New York City already were having trouble finding renters. The rents were very low. There was way too many occupancies. So they were like, what, the Rockefellers want to build 110-story, two of them, 110-story building full of office space? Are you out of your mind? So, and again, that's something to think about too, because it kind of has the parallels with COVID, how a lot of just normal people were put out of business while the tyrants of the world took over even more because they can afford to expend capital. But yeah, nobody wanted the World Trade Centers in 1968. So you got to ask right there, like, why are they even being built? And again, I've heard that too, that they were mostly just empty buildings the entire time, and wouldn't surprise me in the least. But the thing is, they were pulverized to dust. Like, even if they were empty floors, there's so much concrete and steel. There should have been a massive pile where they fell. They crumbled into their own footprint, and there was almost nothing there. The buildings disintegrated as they fell. So, okay. So World Trade Center, there's 4 base ciphers. With the alphabetic order, World Trade Center equals 185. I'll give you one guess. How many days do you think it was from Osama's March 10th birthday to September 11th?
185?
Exactly, 185 days. And this number is specific to other things.
Just don't put the mic too close. When the mic goes too close, sometimes it squelches. So keep it a little bit away from your. We hear you just fine when it's not too close.
Okay. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, exactly 185 days after Bin Laden's birthday, they come down. If you take the alphabetic order with numerology, World Trade Center equals 77. Again, this is the cipher from Manly P. Hall's book. If you spell out September 11th as words in that same cipher, it's also 77. And at the Pentagon, Flight 77 supposedly crashed into the Pentagon. They said it took off at 8:20 and crashed at 9:37. That's 77 minutes later. The Pentagon's on the 77th meridian west. And Pentagon construction began in 1941, right before Pearl Harbor, when they called it the New Pearl Harbor. The Pentagon is 77 feet tall. And what's funny is, if you do a Google search right now for how tall is the Pentagon, they keep changing the height. They've changed it to so many different heights. Back in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, had you done the search, it would have just told you it was 77 feet. And you can look up the Pentagon's official website and see that it's 77 feet tall. At the end of 2018, I've been talking about this with 77 and Flight 77 forever, but I finally had a video go viral on the Pentagon and Flight 77, and it got almost 1 million views. And like a day or two after that video skyrocketed, if you searched on Google how tall the Pentagon was, I think they changed it at the time to 71 feet tall. And I was like, look at that. That's how you know you had an impact. Google just changed and lies now about how tall the Pentagon is. Anyone can verify the Pentagon's 77 feet tall. There's 1 million real websites, but that's why you got to beware of Google. Google is purposefully manipulating information and to keep people in the dark. But that's where I was like, look at what an impact we had. We made it so Google had to manipulate and lie about the height of the Pentagon.
That's amazing. I just heard today that Google has 20,000 engineers that are working on the search engine. There's 20,000 people that are manipulating search engine stuff to making sure that the information, and that's how they can easily change things when they got so many employees that can make spin any type of narrative that they want and make people look, it's on Google.
And you can go to Google and see that almost nobody's from America that works there. I was at the Google campus last April. If you ever go to everyone should do what Google's campus should have experienced what I did to them last April every single day. They have a nice big lunch area outside, which is great, but it presents the opportunity for somebody who cares about this country. By the way, before I even tell you this, if you guys don't know this, Google celebrates its birthday as September 27th. That's the day in history the Jesuits are recognized by Rome. That's not an accident. But anyhow, last April, they have this nice big cafeteria area outside. Hundreds of employees are out there eating. And, I went right up to their cafeteria area and gave them a lecture about, because they know you look at the campus, almost everyone's foreigners. And it's just like Seattle. Seattle's big tech land, and it might as well be little India now. But I gave them a lecture about, they came here to work in America because this country is better than their country. There's opportunity here. There's value here. And there's a reason this country for the time being is better than their country. And they're ruining this country by undermining the First Amendment, because everyone who works at Google knows that they're undermining the First Amendment. And I'll remind people, Google was not a thing until 2001. Nobody knew what Google was until the end of 2001 at about the exact same moment that September 11th happened. Again, if you were in high school and having to do internet reports before 9/11, I graduated June 2001. The only search engines we ever heard of were Alta Vista and Yahoo. But then my freshman year of college, all the professors were telling us the new greatest thing was Google. We needed to use Google for the search engine. So remember, 9/11, Patriot Act, Google, all of a sudden these things in everybody's pockets, these mini computers. And now all of a sudden with the Patriot Act, we have all these new laws that the telecommunications companies can legally collect our data and information and our records and keep tabs on us in the name of stopping. You can just see how this whole surveillance system is being built around. And then again, COVID, which is a whole nother agenda. You saw Google and Apple and Big Brother collaborating together to keep surveillance on everybody with the new 5G technology, where now they could literally track an area and see how many people are there too many people in that building? Is it beyond the COVID occupancy? Again, we're being tricked into this spy state. We're being scared, so we give up our rights and liberties, and then we're letting these fascist enterprises like Google and Facebook, which are not private entities, but wings of for people to understand, people think of Amazon and they think Amazon is this retailer that sells all this stuff. That's true, but Amazon makes the majority of its profits through government contracts, databases, and our federal governments are giving so much money to Amazon to build all the facial recognition technology. Amazon's a leader in that. All of these big tech companies, Jeff Bezos, Facebook's the most obvious. DARPA's LifeLog ended the exact same day that Facebook launched. That's how you know Facebook's really just military intelligence. This whole big tech thing is an illusion. And I'd encourage anybody to go out to California and go check out all these big tech campuses. The only one that's inviting is Google. And I imagine in the future, it's not going to be. They're going to have to close it off and make it look like a fortress like YouTube and Facebook and these other places. YouTube's headquarters is scary. It's in the side of a hill, like a military bunker. There's security around the whole building. Not a single one of them are Americans. I was there documenting it. You can't find an American security. It's like, what kind of place is this? No wonder they hate the First Amendment so much. Not to mention there's a police department right across the street with cop cars all over the place. It's like, man, you think this fun social media company wouldn't need all this security? It's because they know what they're doing. The other year they had to fake the supposed mass shooting at Google. That was a total BS story by the numbers. Never even happened. But again, that's probably also part of the reason they now have all the security, because really all they're doing is creating the storyline for why they need to protect themselves from real patriots who know what these companies are up to, and they're undermining America. Anyway, actually bring me back, because I forget where I was before I went off on my I was just talking about how we went and confronted this Google employees and gave them a lecture about how evil it is what they're doing. And what had just happened to them, as you might recall, at the beginning of last year, there were mass layoffs at Google, and they got laid off through an email. They just got an email from Sundar that they're out of here. Totally impersonal. But yeah, I dropped again. I don't want to, it's just a whole number thing to go down to, but it was very specific to Google. You learn Gematria, you can see why they got the axe the day they all did. And I'll just tell you this much too. Sundar Pichai equals the Jesuit order in Gematria. But yeah, bring me back, Jesse. What's next?
Maybe take a little breath. Wow. Someone's saying you sure got a great memory.
Well, they think that, but they don't know how many things I forgot to say already during this stream. So I do my best. Here, I'll tell you something else that's funny about this world. One of the guys you had to block from the chat, he's a dedicated troll. He's been, this is how bad, I've had dedicated trolls every day since 2015. But he's been spending 10 hours at least every single day since August 1st just trying to harass me. He even figured out where my wife works, and he's been calling her work and trying to get her in trouble at work. It's just crazy the stuff we had to put up with. But the funny thing I'm going to tell you about that guy is when I went to the Google campus, I didn't know that he was a troll of mine. He met me. He met me at YouTube. Go figure. And then he went around with me to all the big tech places that day. And when we got to the Google campus, he asked if I would not film. And he knew what I intended to do, but he asked if I would not film. And he said, hey, will you promote my YouTube channel and I'll do the filming? And I'm a nice guy. I thought, okay, that's cool. He came out here and that'll help him get some more subs. So anyway, when I confronted the Google employees what we were there to do, you know what this guy does? He walks away, points the camera at the sky, drowns out what I'm doing, and starts talking about how there's cookies in the sky. And that's the same guy in your chat today, just trolling away. So the one thing I'd say is, like, if you ever want to speak out, don't have fear that bad things are going to happen to you. But I guarantee you there will be weirdos who try to interfere with your life. But also that guy that you just blocked, he's like a little munchkin and just a tough guy online. He's not going to do anything to anybody. But yeah, there are weirdos out here and agents all over the place and people who will pretend to be your friend. And you got to be privy to that. So that's my warning to people stepping into the truth realm.
Where do you think like a majority of them come from? Because not all of them are paid agents. Do you think that just they're under the spell and it's Stockholm syndrome and they just need to defend their system, defend their masters, and they feel that what they're doing is just true and right because, you're, a thorn in the side of this slave system and they just see they need to defend it? Or do you think most of the people are actually active paid bots and trolls that are out to hammer anyone that's speaking against the narrative?
Well, what you just said is absolutely true. I mean, we've all had the situation where you just try to talk to somebody and share information. They instantly get angry and triggered and they're calling you names and they just want the conversation to end immediately. Because again, that's ego, right? They're like, what you're saying goes counter to what they think they know about the world. And you're immediately shattering that. And then again, the instant thought that's in their brain somewhere is like, well, I must be a moron if all this is true. And they don't want to acknowledge that. So then they make you the enemy. That's absolutely it. But yeah, there's definitely also paid for trolls and agents. Like I said, the one guy's been spending 10 hours every single day since August 1st trolling. I mean, nobody, if he's not getting paid to do that, it's just like, man, that's sad to spend that much of your life doing this. So.
It sounds like he has a crush on you.
Well, yeah, you just never know. So I wonder sometimes.
Wow. What other thing is pertinent do you think that, we need to talk about here today? Because, we've got got a lot of people here. There's a lot of buzz in the chat and we're going to reach a lot of people. So, what's kind of like stuff for today? Like what's coming? What about the April 8th thing?
So we have the eclipse coming up on April 8th. Here's my thing. Again, I don't promote fear, but I promote awareness. Another thing that kicked me into overdrive, it was funny, about the same time I found this knowledge was the same time Janet Napolitano, this is back in 2013. For people, you can still look it up on the internet. Thanks to the internet, things get archived. Go back and listen to Janet Napolitano's resignation speech from the Department of Homeland Security. She said the next 9/11 is not if, but when. And she said she knows what it'll be. It'll be a massive cyber attack that takes down the grid nationally. And of course, you have the same people who simulated the pandemic, the World Economic Forum. They've been doing the annual simulations of a cyber attack that does something on the likes of this. Of course, Obama just put out the movie Leave the World Behind, which begins with people's phones going down, and then the grid goes down, and then chaos is breaking out, and propaganda flyers are coming out of the air from different nations of the world over the streets of America. Here, a good one. Right at the end of that film, you see a billionaire bunker, the little girl from the families. She's in this bunker watching Friends. If you haven't seen the movie, it's that part doesn't really seem that important, but as you see the little girl in the bunker, you can see on the wall, painted in this billionaire's bunker, you can see the name Commodus written on the wall. And a lot of us know Commodus through the Russell Crowe Gladiator film. He's Commodus in that movie. But Commodus died in the year 192 AD. And the film title, Leave the World Behind, equates to 192 with the most simple cipher. And again, Commodus is from the time of the fall of Rome. We are the modern day Rome. So keep in mind, when Janet Napolitano stepped down in 2013, Obama was the president then. Janet Napolitano was also a politician in Arizona. Public Enemy, the hip hop group, recently put out an album, What You Gonna Do When the Grid Goes Down, with Arizona on the cover. Arizona's on the cover of that album, the Valentine State. And sadly, at the time, we were able to project that there would be a massive blackout type of ritual on the following Valentine's Day, which was 142 days after the album came out on 14/2. And sure enough, there was. Atlanta had a big blackout. Houston had a blackout with crazy weather that lasted for over a week. Portland, my home city, had a huge blackout that lasted for over a week. Portland even had another week-long blackout this year on the same day that Tucker Carlson put out his episode about how a power outage is coming. Forget what was he with Kevin Costner? I forget who he did the interview with. But the same day he did that, my city had a huge blackout. I don't live in Portland anymore, so I didn't have to experience it. But again, I'm from Portland. So anyhow, they've been telling us for a long time that this event is coming. Now, the thing is, we know that sometimes they're telling us about stuff that's still 30, 40, 50 years away. So I don't know if their blackout event is around the corner or if it's a long way away. But here's what I'll point out about Arizona. In light of Janet Napolitano and the Public Enemy album cover, we have a big basketball event coming up. And the Final Four's in Arizona. And it ends on the day of the eclipse, the day the light is blacked out, because there's a total eclipse. Right now, if you're watching the March Madness tournament, there's 2 ads they're running. And they both have blackouts. In one, some celebrities pulling the switch to turn off the power. And then the other one, the power's just going out in all the cities across America. And they're like, have our service because you'll still be able to watch March Madness even if the power's out everywhere. It's like, I don't know if that's true. That's probably false advertising. But the point is, Arizona is clearly a clue for this because of Janet Napolitano and the Public Enemy album. By the way, Public Enemy put out the album What You Gonna Do When the Grid Goes Down on September 25th, and it was the anniversary of JFK's weather control speech. If people don't know this, JFK gave a speech about the future of weather control September 25th, 1961. He gave it in a nice way. You know, again, like, there could be a nice weather control. He was explaining because of emerging technology. For people who don't know, the first act of weather warfare was admitted to by the Royal Air Force August 15th, 1952, which is the anniversary of the Jesuits being founded in Paris, France in history, August 15th. Has to do with why Bill Gates was married to Melinda, whose birthday's August 15th, and her middle name's French. Like the Jesuits are from France, and she comes from a family of Jesuit priests. But anyway, the first act of weather warfare, August 15th, 52. The U.S. admitted to weather warfare in the time of Vietnam with Operation Popeye. And then more recently, the Chinese, it was international headlines. It's crazy that people still don't think we can manipulate the weather. I mean, China told the whole world that they were manipulating the weather for the Winter Games. That was the way they created the snowfall to make the conditions right for the Winter Games. So anyone can look up those headlines. They were in all major stream media. So yes, weather control is a real thing. And JFK was talking about how it's an emerging technology. Let's not forget Lyndon Johnson, who became president after he died, said who controls the weather controls the world. Lyndon Johnson literally said that. But September 25th, 61 is when JFK gave his weather control speech. And he explained how, because of this emerging technology, we don't have to worry about drought. We don't have to worry about famine. And meanwhile, here we are in 2024. There's parts of the world that are experiencing extreme drought and famine. So where's the technology? Why aren't they using it for that? How come, you guys, you just started to pay attention to the jokes. Last year on Bill Clinton's birthday, California was under storm warning for Hurricane Hillary. We could go on and on and on and on about all the little sick jokes. But the reason I'm bringing this up about the Public Enemy album coming out on the anniversary of that speech is because it was the extreme weather that knocked out the power in Atlanta and Houston and Portland. And think about that. That's a big triangle across the whole nation. All of these places had crazy weather on the same Valentine's Day that we pointed out when that album came out. Again, we saw it because it was lined up with Klaus Schwab, who's the leader of it was 322 days after Klaus Schwab's birthday. And then it made a lot of sense why it happened in Houston at the time, because this is how bad the jokes are. When I was talking about sports being a part of it, The two big Houston stars that wanted out of town in Houston at the time that they had that unprecedented weather and the power going out were Deshaun Watson, like Watts, like power, and J.J. Watt, whose birthday is March 22nd, 322, just like how that day was 322 days after Klaus Schwab's birthday. And again, he's a big guy on the world stage. He's one of the most prominent Jesuits in the world right now. Probably actually, I'd say third in command after the Superior General and the Pope. Probably the next on the Jesuit pecking order right now is Klaus Schwab. But yeah, so again, I'm not saying live in fear. What I'm saying is, in case your city becomes the next city where they turn out the power for a week or God forbid, longer than that, make sure you have non-perishable food in your home. Make sure you have a water supply in your home. Make sure you have things so when it's dark outside, do you have a battery with a lot of flashlights? Do you have one of these high-quality flashlights that you can charge out in the sun in the daytime? We're coming into the warmer months, so you probably don't need to worry about the cold as much, but it could be really hot. It could be really hot. So do you have a strategy to keep cool? Again, I would just be thinking about this, not in a fear, anxiety-provoking way, but I need to have a plan in case that does happen where I am kind of way. And let's hope it's still 30, 40 years from now. But at the same time, here's what I'd rather say. Let's hope that before they get to that plan, the world wakes up and we overthrow this tyranny. Again, that's the other thing I preach over here. Revolution or bust. And I want to make a real point about this, about revolution or bust. My favorite founder, at least from what I know in the history books, is Thomas Jefferson. And a curious quote that I used to read everything about Thomas Jefferson, and somewhere along the way, I read that Thomas Jefferson said that this country needs to have a revolution every 19 years to preserve liberty. And when I read that, I thought, that's weird. Every 19 years? That's a really specific number. Why 19? And man, that seems like a lot. Every 19 years. I mean, that's in a person's lifetime, you'd be having a lot of revolutions. So I was like, what is that about? Every 19 years, a revolution to preserve liberty. Well, let's look now at maybe what he was talking about. So what I've learned over the years is the moon is on a 19-year cycle. Every 19 years, the moon is in the same exact position in the sky that it was 19 years earlier. Case in point, April 8th is going to be the day of the total eclipse this year. 19 years later on April 8th, there was a total eclipse in the world. Okay. Of course, there's been more total eclipses, but every 19 years, you're going to see the same pattern. So that means 19 years from April 8th into the future, what's that, 2043? There's going to be a total eclipse April 8th, 2043. So the moon is on a 19-year cycle. Now, again, we just had COVID-19. And by the way, we were calling this out way before 2020. I was explaining in 2015, because I've been onto this since back then, but I was explaining why in 2020, no doubt 19 years after 9/11 and the 19 hijackers, something crazy was going to happen in the world. Ended up being COVID-19. 19 years before 9/11, what happened? The war on drugs was declared in 1982. So 19 years before the war on terror, which was 19 years before the war on germs, we had the war on drugs. And then what happened 19 years before the war on drugs? In my opinion, I call it the war on courage, because JFK got shot in the head. And, like my parents' generation, they were all kids when again, my parents were born in 52 and 53. So that generation learned, because JFK was considered to be a rabble rouser. He was going against the Federal Reserve and he was trying to stop a war. And the next thing you know, boom, he's dead. And again, a lot of people interpret that like, oh man, he was kind of going against the flow there, and maybe it's not going to go against the flow. 19 years before that was 1944. That was the year that the U.S. sent the most troops to World War II. So again, there is something to 19-year cycles and the moon, and why Thomas Jefferson, he must have been aware of it in the cabal, because he said every 19 years you're going to need a revolution to preserve liberty. And let's not forget that Jefferson was also one of the ones worried about what would happen if the Jesuits came out of suppression. And I forgot to mention that the Jesuits came out of suppression in the time of James Madison. And you remember earlier how I was talking about that 144 number? How Jesuit orders 144, all those assassinations? The Jesuits came out of suppression 144 days after James Madison's birthday. And I don't think in this stream I've talked about the number 201. If I did, I forgot. But again, we're in the time of the first Jesuit Pope, and he's the first to live in Suite 201 at the Vatican. And these numbers 201 and 144 will come together a lot too. I'll give you an example of what happened in Oklahoma City in a moment, but Jesuit order is 144. If you run the alphabetic order in reverse and throw a "the" on it, the Jesuit order, it's 201. And the reason you know that's not an accident is because the founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, his name equals 201. And the first Jesuit pope, who's the first to live in Suite 201 at the Vatican, he's Pope Francis, but his birth name is Jorge Mario Bergoglio, which equals 201. And, Joe Biden, when he lost his son, Bo Biden died 201 days before the Pope's birthday, and the same Jesuit priest who did the funeral for Bo Biden did the inauguration for Joe Biden, and his name is Leo Jeremiah O'Donovan, which equals 201. And by the way, just like how the nation's capital wasn't always Washington, D.C., which is where the Jesuits set up camp when they came to America, thus Georgetown, the nation's inauguration day wasn't always January 20th. The majority of the world writes that day 20/1, which is similar to 201, but it's also the 201st day of the nation's age each year. The U.S.'s age, the 201st day of the nation's age is January 20th. An inauguration of the President of the United States, which is the official title for that day on the government website, equals 201. And by the way, the CIA, the words in their logo, Central Intelligence Agency, United States of America, that's 201. Their motto, the work of a nation, the center of intelligence, that's 201. The CIA was established in history on the 201st day of the Pope's age. Some people call the CIA Catholics in Action. The most famous comic book character, CIA agent in U.S. history is Jack Ryan, Jesuit educated at Boston College, who in his, I think the book's called Red Rabbit in the Jack Ryan series, but he says, us Jesuits run the world. We're just humble about it. And of course, oh God, I always forget his name. There's a famous CIA agent. Is it Howard Hughes? Is it E. Howard Hughes? I think that's it. But he said he used to work with the CIA, and he says the greatest intelligence agency in the world is the Jesuits. And again, there were founders who were very worried about the Jesuits. And a lot of people don't understand, but America was founded largely by people who were trying to escape the tyranny of the Catholic Church in Europe. So those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And we're definitely repeating it. And we've been repeating it, and people aren't catching on to the clues. But yeah, 201, only one president in history's name equals 201, and it's James Madison. James Madison, who was the president when the Jesuits came out of suppression. And by the way, right now we're in the time of the 85th March Madness tournament, and one of the big sensational stories was James Madison getting a big upset in the first round. And it's such a they beat Wisconsin, and Wisconsin's campus is in Madison, Wisconsin. But James Madison died at age 85. And again, it's just like Yale's 322 years old right now. They had the biggest upset of the first round on March 22nd over Auburn when again, Order 322, Skull and Bones is there. And we were talking about how Skull and Bones, or we were talking about how Gematria is forwards and backwards. Skull and Bones equals 41 forwards, 76 in reverse. Auburn, who got beat by Yale, had 41 points at halftime and then got stuck on 76 points and couldn't score another point in the game and got beat. And again, these things are not an accident. You learn this knowledge, you'll see how scripted things are, from college sports to pro sports to your news to your weather. And anyway, Jesse, let me hand it back over.
How do you think that they would script that, say, that Yale game to have these players in college that, are fighting, scratching to win a championship? They're going through schooling. Like, do you think that, even colleges, when they're in the sports, they're inducted into these, Freemason orders, and, they're told that they need to do these certain things, like, because that Yale is obviously, that's a big upset for that to happen. But, to have the other side go along with it, how do you think that takes place?
Yeah, well, money corrupts all things. And again, I mean, they gave us the movie in the beginning of the 90s about college basketball players being paid under the table. And of course, they used actual college players who went to the NBA, Penny Hardaway, Shaq. I forget who else is in that movie. But yeah, I mean, when money controls all things in this world. So, I mean, look at, okay, tattoos are expensive. Tattoos are an expensive thing. Look at the way college athletes are inked up. I mean, their bodies are just covered. There's so much money under the table in college sports because there's so, again, college sports can be bet on. That's where the corruption starts right there. And it's not hard to see when these players are shaving points. And here's the one other thing. I've been saying this for years. They use technology to ensure outcomes. You watch the end of that Auburn-Yale game. I just said Auburn couldn't get off 76 points against Skull and... Here, for people to know, Skull and Bones equals 41. The 41st president of this nation was George Herbert Walker Bush, Skull and Bones member. His son was also in Skull and Bones. His birthday's July 6th, 7-6. The Georgia Guidestones came down on his 76th birthday. They were put up in history on March 22nd. We should talk a little bit about what just happened on March 22nd with Catherine's cancer announcement and what happened in Russia with the attack at the concert venue. But what I was going to say is, if you can find the end of, watch the last 5 minutes of the Auburn-Yale game, you'll see the play near the end where the Auburn player gets to the rim and lays it in, and it looked like the ball should have gone in, but then it like rolled around and then rolled off. And I was like, that's what I mean with the technology. That ball looked like it should have been points. And by the way, just for the perfect scripts, Yale finished the game with 78 points. They won 78-76. I've always talked about the significance of 78 in 3-2-2 as well, because the word Genesis equals 78, and the 78th verse of Genesis is Genesis 3:2-2, where it mentions the tree of life and knowing good and evil. Well, the physical model for Kabbalah is the tree of life, and there's a good half and there's an evil half. The evil half is called the Clipoth, but the tree of life has 3 pillars and 22 paths, like Genesis 3:2-2. And no doubt, Skull and Bones gets their 3:2-2 symbolism from a lot of things. It goes back to the philosophers that died in the year 322. It has to do with Genesis 3:2-2. It has to, there's a lot in the 3:2-2, but no doubt a big part of it is Genesis. Again, Skull and Bones gets their symbolism from how the Templars buried their dead in an ossuary. And Skull and Bones is modeled after the Bavarian Illuminati, which was founded by the Jesuit Adam Weishaupt. And again, the Jesuits have the Templar cross in their logo. But yeah, just money and literally technology, and those are, and the refs too. I mean, the refs, like in the tournament, if anyone saw the Oakland, I think it was Oakland, North Carolina State, they're showing the instant replay forever. They're showing the instant replay forever on this close call, and you can see the ball bends back the defender's hand. You can see his hand and his fingers snap back. They're showing it in super slow-mo like 50 times while they're doing this replay for 5 minutes. So it's like, oh, okay, it's going to be Oakland's ball because it did go off the defender's hand. So then after making the crowd sit there and watch this 1,000 times, had Oakland gotten the ball back, they would have had a chance to get off one shot to win the game. But then the announcers are blown away because then it comes back after 5 minutes of watching this replay, and the refs give the ball to the team who the ball clearly went off their hand. So, and they were going to be down at the other end of the court, so they weren't going to have any chance to shoot. It was just going to take away the opportunity for the one team to have a chance to win the game. And again, if I'm not trying to make people gamblers, but when you see that kind of stuff happening, if you have real-time betting apps in your state, I mean, you should have bet North Carolina State instantly because the refs just took away the opportunity for the chance for Oakland to win the game. And sure enough, they lost in overtime. But you pay attention to sports, you see this stuff all the time. It's like, what are they trying to do other than outrage the fans? What's the point of making them watch in super slow-mo it go off the defender's hand 50 different times from 50 different angles, and then to give the ball to the other team anyway, despite after it's just, this is nothing new, but it's just, they mock the sports fans. It's so
Cocky.
Obviously rigged. Money corrupts all things. And that's the end of my answer on that.
They're getting very, very cocky, it seems like, now they don't even care that people are uncovering. They seem, to be feeling like they're in an untouchable place. But what I wanted to ask you about is, what do you know about when the calendar got changed to the Gregorian, and we used to have a 13-month, 28-day calendar, and how is that changed, the numerology? Did they do that in order to, be able to control the numerology as well? And just wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Well, again, it's the Jesuit priest Christopher Clavius who's credited with the Gregorian calendar, which is named after the Pope. Again, 52-week calendar they move us to. The word Pope with the alphabetic order is 52. Just like Earth, just like devil. Some people think the Pope is the devil. But anyway, the date that calendar was implemented in history was February 24th. And that was the 337th day of Christopher Clavius's age at the time. And that's the 68th prime number. And in Gematria, Catholicism equals 68, mathematics equals 68, solar system equals 68. Remember, this happened at the end of the 16th century, the Gregorian calendar, and that's the same moment, or that's the same century where the Jesuits were created to counter Martin Luther. It's the same century that the heliocentric model was agreed to. By the way, heliocentrism is another 201, like the Jesuit order, also, again, from their century. And the Catholic Church did have a lot to do with the battle between the sun being the center, recognized as the center of all things. But again, the calendar was implemented on the 337th day of Christopher Columbus's age, which again is the 68th prime number. And all these words equal 68. Again, Catholicism, solar system, the Catholic Church began as a sun cult, and mathematics. And we were talking about how important that year 1968 was, how all those agendas went into motion. For the record, other things that happened in 68 besides just all the 911 stuff, fentanyl was approved by the FDA in 68. Coronavirus was coined in 68. Just recently in my home state, Oregon, on the 68th day of the year, the governor, whose name equals 68, she reversed her policy on legalizing fentanyl because of how many people are dying. But think about it. The biggest killers of the 21st century have been the wars that came out of 9/11, the COVID pandemic, and all of the overdoses from opioids, especially more recently with fentanyl. There's a book that's 201 pages long, if you can believe it, that came out in 1968. It's called The Population Bomb, and it's a call for how we have to do something radical to curb the Earth's population. So, again, I'd encourage everybody to look into that book, The Population Bomb, written by a Stanford professor. If you've ever been to Stanford's campus, it's all looks like you're in ancient Rome. But 1968 again, and again, think about it. Mathematics, right? Solar system, a calendar that's this system. At the same moment the calendar was implemented at the same time period that this calendar that we're now on that says today is March 25th, 2024, the day we're doing this interview. That's the same moment that the English language was standardized with the 26-letter alphabet. And the oldest English script that's known goes back to the year 1011 AD, and it's credited to the Catholic monk Burfirth of Ramsey Abbey. So again, the language is Catholic, the calendar is Catholic, all roads lead to Rome. What I'm saying is they set up a system, and that's why you can take history from the end of the 16th century forwards, and you'll see how it all lines up. All the things that go into his storybook, all the big events in history just line up so perfectly when you're aware of this. But you asked, going to this 12-month calendar, I question that too. In light of the calendar being synced up with the life of Jesus, again, in the Bible, the story of Jesus goes from his birth to age 12, and then there's a blackout on his life, and then it comes back at age 30. For the record, the word Bible equals 30. But, you have 18 years of Jesus' life that you don't know about, but you have this calendar that's also, in sync with Jesus' life. 12. So we've been talking about how significant 144 is. The square root of 144 is 12. And of course, now we have a 12-month calendar. We have 12 hours in the morning, 12 hours in the evening. Every single day, the way that we tell time, there's 1,440 minutes in a day. So 1440. Of course, 144 is a biblical number. So yeah, I still honestly have not unlocked the mystery of why 12 is so important, unless it's just that, unless of how it fits into 144 and perhaps the 144,000 chosen that are mentioned in Revelation. But the question you asked me is something I still kind of speculate on, and like I always say, I've been doing this research since 2013, so now more than 10 years, but I intend to do this research for the rest of my life. So we have this interview 10 years from now, we'll probably know a million more things than we do today. So
what about the solar system? It's like a solar, and you say the heliocentric model came about when they wanted this whole deception. So what's your thoughts on that?
You asking me that question just stuck something else in my mind that I forgot to finish up.
Go with that first. Yeah. Go with that first.
Okay. I should have mentioned the word Helios, which is the Greek
No,
name for the sun.
go with what's in your head first. I'll
No,
remember to
it's
ask
because
this.
it's related. The
Okay.
word Helios equates to 68, the Greek name for the sun. Helios is 68. So you have this Catholic Church. There's so many things that people have to know. If you guys want to look this up, the Catholic Church began celebrating the sun in the sky's birthday on 12/25, what we call Christmas Day, in the year 274 AD. The Jesuit motto, Isus hominum salvator, equates to 274. If you run it in reverse, it equals 266, like Pope Francis is the 266th Pope, the first Jesuit Pope. The Roman Catholic Church began celebrating Jesus' birthday on 12/25 in the year 320 AD. And Roman Catholic Church equals 320. Notice that's 46 years later. We talked about how there's 46 books in the Catholic Old Testament and how Catholic also equates to 46, like JFK assassinated age 46, like Joe Biden elected number 46, 46 weeks after the Pope's birthday. I'll tell you another 46 and 320. It was also a massive 201, but it was George Floyd's killing. George Floyd was pulled out of a Mercedes-Benz ML320 and killed in front of police cruiser 320 at age 46. And these things aren't an accident, because I could tell you a lot more about George Floyd and all the 201s in it and how they lined it up with the toppling of the Albert Pike statue in D.C. and then how 201 days later, the January 6th happened with the Confederate flag flying when, again, Lincoln blamed the Civil War on the Jesuits. Not to mention January 6th, it's like 6/1, like the Civil War began in 61. But okay, Helios has the 68 connection, which goes with the whole calendar being implemented at the time of now the sun's the center. We have a new calendar. The Catholic Church is in control. Again, the Catholic Church is growing their power in the world. So, okay, to come back to 9/11, I was going to tell you about the 4 ciphers of World Trade Center. We talked about how it's 185 and how the attack was 185 days after Osama Bin Laden's birthday. With numerology, we talked about how it's 77, like September 11th, like Flight 77 and its Mega 77 ritual into the 77-foot tall Pentagon on the 77 meridian. If you run the alphabetic order in reverse with numerology, World Trade Center equals 94. That matters because the World Trade Centers opened on the 94th day of 1973. We said how the word terror equates to 68. It does. If you run it in reverse, terror equates to 94. And coronavirus pandemic equals 94, and so does Seattle, Washington. And just the point is coronavirus was used for terrorism too, and was perfectly synced with 9/11. And Bill and Melinda Gates were married on the first day in 94, and then Kurt Cobain died 94 days later, 206 days from Bill Gates' birthday, when Seattle's the 206 area code, and that's the sacrifice number in Jewish Gematria, which makes sense because there's 206 bones in an adult human body. And then Bill Gates' mother died in 94, and then his dad died at age 94 in the time of the pandemic. But the point I'm just making is how 94 is connected to terror, and just like how 9/11 scared the bejesus out of people, so did the pandemic. And there's a lot more. I wrote a book for people who don't know called Number Games, and I talk about why from 9/11 to the pandemic being declared was 222 months later on the nose, and why Donald Trump was at the World Economic Forum the day COVID was confirmed in the U.S. on the 222nd day of his age. And anyway, I don't want to go down that whole thing. You can check out we probably talked about that years ago when you had me on back in the time of the pandemic in my book. But okay, again, 68, 94. Now, with regards to the Catholic Church, I'm forgetting off the top of my head. I know the word Gregorian equals 94. Gregorian's another 94. And again, it was established in this 68-94 ritual. And a lot of people didn't catch the biblical joke with what they did with the World Trade Centers. In Jewish gematria, Tisha B'Av equates to 911. 9/11. And it's to remember the destruction of the 2 temples. So we get the destruction of the Twin Towers on 9/11. And in English, Tisha B'Av equals 44. And that year, 9/11 was exactly 44 days after Tisha B'Av had concluded. And, okay. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit because I'm trying to remember where I was trying to go. Okay, so we've covered 3 of the 4 values of World Trade Center. We talked about where 185 matters. We covered where 77 matters. We covered where 94 matters. The only number we did not cover about World Trade Center is that it also equates to 247. When you run the alphabetic order in reverse, World Trade Center is 247. Now, maybe this is a stretch or maybe not. They referred to what happened in Israel as Israel's 9/11. What the October 7th attack, which was the anniversary of us invading Afghanistan after 9/11. And the thing is both the Illuminati and the United States of America turned 247 years old in 2023. May 1st, 2023 was the 247th birthday of the Illuminati. In sports that day, if you were paying attention, the 76ers were a 13.5-point underdog and upset the Celtics. It was so easy to call because there was 247s in favor of the 76ers. Keep in mind, the Illuminati was founded in 1776, May 1st, 64 days before this nation's first birthday. But if I recall, the 76ers got their 247th all-time win versus the Celtics, and the Celtics got their 247th all-time loss in the playoffs, if I recall. But I know there were 247s in favor of the 76ers if they won as 13.5-point underdogs. And for those of you guys who don't bet, that's a huge payout in sports. But yeah, sports are rigged and scripted. News is rigged and scripted. It's undeniable. You learn this. It's just undeniable. All the people who try to come at me and say, like, no way, you guys are just you're in the clouds and you're in ignorance land, okay? We've been proving our points and calling things out way before they happen for over a decade, okay? You got a lot of arguments to try and debunk, which you're never going to do, and we're just going to keep building the resume as days pass by. But the other thing about this 247 is the cycle of the moon. The moon has a 13-month cycle, and the moon has a 19-year cycle. And 19 times 13 is 247, right? So they're doing things in 19-year cycles, and 9/11 was one of them because, again, there were 19 hijackers, and it came 19 years after the war on terror, 19 years after the war on drugs, and again, 9/11 is the war on terror, and then 19 years later is the war on germs, which all of those wars, at the end of the day, what did they all have in common, all those wars? They took away rights and liberties from Americans, and they built the domestic surveillance spy state, okay?
And they make everything worse. Every time they have a war on something, the problem gets worse. More government, less freedoms, more control over the people.
Exactly. That's the game. And you just know if these people are not stopped, by the time 2039 rolls around, that's going to be 19 years after the COVID pandemic. You just know 19 years later, they're going to have their next big whopper. And it's not to say that there aren't things we shouldn't be ready for between now and then. They do plenty of stuff in between, but it's like every 19 years is when the real hammer comes down. And, I'd like to think that we have till 2039 before they turn out the power on us, but I don't know. Like I'm saying, you got the March Madness tournament in Arizona. That's a big part of it. You got the eclipse on the day of the championship. I'd have, like I said earlier, an ounce of prevention. An ounce of preparation is worth a pound of cure. I'd make sure you got some basic necessities at home and you're not caught with your pants down in case they do turn the power off in your town. One more thing, since I just brought up what happened in Israel on October 7th. If you were following me on my own channel on October 4th, it was a Wednesday. It was the day of the 10-4 emergency alert in the U.S., but also the 10-4 emergency alert in Russia. We talked about how the media was coding a certain number all over all the headlines. Different news outlets were all coding the same thing, and it pointed right to October 7th. And I said, it looks like something big is going down October 7th. And we'd already had this time period circled because that was 2 days before Yale's 322nd birthday. The day Netanyahu came back, December 29th, 2022, I explained why there'd be a big war ritual in Israel, and it would probably be around the time Yale turned 322. We weren't wrong. But, October 7th, that was the anniversary of us invading Afghanistan after 9/11. And George W. Bush was the sitting president when we invaded Afghanistan, and he referred to what we were doing as a crusade, and he got a lot of criticism for that, because, of course, the crusades were Christians against Muslims, or really the Catholic Church against all non-believers, but the Muslims got the worst of it. So October 7th is an interesting date because the word military equates to 107, and it's the day leaving 85 days left in the year. The word Templar equals 85. Also, other words that equal 85, crucify and Christ. So the war begins on the day, leaving 85 days left in the year. And now we have another onslaught against Muslims. What's going on in Gaza? By the way, that was 282 days after Netanyahu came back into power, and Benjamin Netanyahu equals 282. And that's, again, he's been a genocidal maniac the whole time. He's always been over there in Israel. But today, the day we do this interview, today is the 85th day of this year. And the United Nations today passed a resolution for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So that means it's 170 days later. Now, this is what's interesting. If you run the alphabetic order forwards, sacrifice equals 73. If you run the alphabetic order in reverse, sacrifice equals 170. If you run the alphabetic order forwards, Gaza equals 35. If you run the alphabetic order in reverse, Gaza equals 73. And if you go back to 2021, that was the year Israel turned 73 years old. And for the whole week leading up to Israel's 73rd birthday, including the day of their 73rd birthday, Israel's Air Force was bombing the bejesus out of Gaza. That's why Gaza's been bombed to death so many times. That's why when you see sites of Gaza, there's so much rubble there, because they've had so many airstrikes and artillery strikes against them. But they said that that was one of the worst onslaughts by the Air Force against Gaza in the period of the ongoing conflict. But it was a sick joke, and we were calling it out then, how it was a purposeful sacrifice ritual against Gaza. Because, again, sacrifice is 73 like Gaza 73. The whole week leading up to Israel's 73rd birthday, that happened. Now, again, in reverse, sacrifice is 170. You mean to tell me the United Nations finally gets it done 170 days after it began, after they've blown up all these hospitals, turned the place to even more rubble, killed off even more people, when it's largely a nation? A huge percentage of that population is just women and children, because of so many men, they've died from the conflict. These are sick satanic jokes. And again, you think of the Jesuits who have the Templar cross. By the way, the leader of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, his name equals 201, like the Jesuit order. And the United Nations was originally created in San Francisco, named after St. Francis of Assisi, who created the Franciscans, which were the precursor to the Jesuits, which is also why Pope Francis is named after St. Francisco. And it's not an accident that the Church of Satan was established in San Francisco either. For the record, Anton LaVey, its founder, died 201 days after his birthday and 201 days before the sitting Pope's birthday at the time. I forgot to mention that Catholic Pope equals 201, like the Jesuit order, like the Holy Bible equals 201, and they use the Bible as a playbook. But again, I was just talking about how Gaza equals 35 forward, 73 in reverse. Coming back to the 35 point, we already talked about how Catholic equals 35. The war in Gaza began October 7th, 35 days before the Catholic Superior General's November 12th birthday. And on top of that, Hamas, which no doubt is controlled opposition, was 35 years old at the time. You see? It's just, all of this stuff is so sick to witness, and to think that here in the U.S. and other nations of the West too, we're paying all this tax money to Israel. And right now, the bombs that are being dropped on their heads, those Gazan people that didn't do nothing about nothing, literally, like, we're paying for that. We're having to pay for that. That's our money that's being spent on that to terrorize those people by a code. And again, the reason, like I said, my life changed when 9/11 happened, because I knew that it was such an evil event and it was such a lie, and I knew there was something just so ritualistic about it. And my thought back then was, if this was done today, I bet they could do something else just like this in the future. This needs to be found out and stopped. And that's been the effort literally by me ever since. But since I found this Gematria thing in 2013, I just been, for Bill to know, I've been here. There's only been one day that I did not put new content out in the world trying to expose what's going on, and I had a good excuse to not put out any content that day. It's because my house was burglarized and sabotaged, and my life was flipped upside down. But I spent that whole day cleaning up the mess that was left in my house, and I got back to it the next day and started putting out content again. So, yeah, I've been super motivated, and it's sad because I used to be able to get good views, but if you go to my channel now, you'll see like a video has 1,000 views, maybe it's got 2,000 views. Back in 2016, 2017, even when I came back at the end of 2018, we could get upwards of 1 million views. Now, because of the algorithm, it's just, it's hard to get the word out. So, Jesse, what I'm saying is thank you for having me on, because, again, I always I wish other people would ask to interview and I could share this on their platform. But again, some of these people out here that have big platforms, the reason they have big platforms is because they don't put out any real information, which you're not guilty of. And again, I do appreciate the opportunity, Jesse. So if you have any more questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. But I probably have dropped so many numbers and things, I probably have most people's heads spinning. So
here's Carol was asking, so what's the point of all this gematria and numbers, like harvesting human energy for aliens? And you can nix the alien part of the question, or you can speak on that as well. But, you know, what's the whole point of that?
Sure. Okay. So if you search the word gematria on YouTube, you'll probably find my channel. But if you just scroll down, the most popular video on gematria on YouTube is by a rabbi, and he's talking about Hebrew gematria. And he says right in the beginning, he says, gematria ultimately is about energy. In her question, she just asked, is this about energy harvesting? I'll remind people, Pixar put out the film Monsters, Inc. just days after 9/11. And when you see the full lineup of monsters, if you've never seen that cartoon, it's about monsters who like to scare people to harvest their energy. But even that scene in the movie that came out just days after 9/11, as the monsters are walking, there's a big clock in the background, and the hands are on 9 and 11. It's just so blatant. But anyway, the most simple cipher of gematria is ABC is 1, 2, 3. And if you write out English, it equals 74. If you write out gematria, it equals 74. If you write out energy, it equals 74. Other words that equal 74. Occult, Masonic, Jewish. Again, Masonry is based in Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah, it's based in the Old Testament. Masonry is very much Jewish. That's why the Star of David's all over Masonic temples. That's why they etch Allah's number in the 4th book of the Bible, which is at the start of the Torah, is numbers. Again, numbers are very important to Judaism. That isn't to say that Jews are doing all of this. It's just to say that knowledge is very much attributed to them. Again, Zionism. Maybe let me just answer her question instead of going on. I'm so bad about tangents. But anyway, again, all of these 74 things. Here's another 74 word: killing, stabbing. The 74th day of the calendar year is to remember the stabbing of Caesar, the Ides of March, except for in leap years, then it falls on the 75th day. This year, on the 74th day of the year, you had Chuck Schumer in his 74th year of life, who is Jewish, take on 74-year-old Netanyahu, who, by the way, the day Netanyahu turned 74, the Jewish woman was stabbed to death in Detroit, who is friends with the governor and the attorney general. But anyway, the 74 is a big number. And the point I'm making is about harvesting energy. We started with 9/11. The World Trade Centers were on the 74th meridian west. And that was a massive energy harvest. I mean, a ton of energy was used to turn those buildings to dust, but then just what it did to the energy level of the people of the world. You know, my sister, for example, was so scared that day. My sister's 12 years older than me, but she was freaking out. She thought we were all going to die. She essentially wanted me to go find a hole in the ground and stay there until the bomb went off. And I was telling her not to trip. I mean, her and I are out on the West Coast. I was in Arizona. She was in Portland at the time. And I mean, it was hysteria everywhere. We had to go I was at Arizona State. That's where I went to college. And I remember my first class that day on the Tuesday, we still had to go to class. My professor was Professor Applebloom, and she was freaking out too. But anyway, yeah, energy. They are manipulating our energy. The coronavirus pandemic simulation, event 201, it was October 18th, the day leaving 74 days left in the year. And who died right before the coronavirus pandemic simulation? Kary Mullis. If you don't know who Kary Mullis is, look up that name. He died at age 74 from supposedly pneumonia. It's just a sick joke. Kary Mullis was the biggest critic of Anthony Fauci. He'd been calling Anthony Fauci out from the 90s because Anthony Fauci was the face of HIV, and Kary Mullis was a major skeptic. But he was saying that Anthony Fauci was taking the PCR test. Kary Mullis is who created the PCR test. But Kary Mullis was explaining in the 90s that Anthony Fauci was taking his PCR test and using it in a false manner to connect anything to anything. And Kary Mullis said he's doing that for money. He'll falsify anything if people pay him enough. Again, about how money corrupts all things. And of course, Anthony Fauci's a good little Jesuit too, who went to Holy Cross and then is now a member of Georgetown. But 74 is a huge number, and it's where I'm writing a few different children's books right now. I'm trying to figure out the right way to get this to children, and I'm doing a book on 74. It's really where a lot of my research began. Just for the record, Jesus, cross, Messiah, gospel, parables, they all equal 74 in the most simple cipher, just like Jewish, like how he's from Judea. But it is all about energy. Everything they're doing is about energy. It's also about just like another way to look at this. Hermeticism. Hermeticism is another one of the ancient mystery religions like Kabbalah. Again, the ancient mystery religions involve Kabbalah, Hermeticism, Kundalini, alchemy. For people who are not familiar with Hermeticism, read the 7 Hermetic principles. That they fit in with all of this too. But the first Hermetic principle is all is mental. And that's why these people spend so much time trying to control our minds and the way we feel and the way we think and what we believe. From the cradle to the grave, they are trying to control us, and they know a great way to control us is with really scary stuff. That's a really great way to manipulate people's energy and their minds and then put them on a certain path. And and her question about aliens here, I'll tell you a funny thing about aliens. So, of course, the first official UFO sighting was in the year 47. Now, 47 is the reflection of 74, and that was up here in Seattle. That's why the Space Needle's up here. But Seattle's on the 47th parallel, and supposedly the UFO that was officially spotted flew by Mount Rainier. The word Rainier equals 47. So then shortly after the Rainier spotting is the famous UFO spotting. Like if I went out and surveyed Americans and said, hey, where's the first official UFO sighting? I bet most people wouldn't even know it was Seattle. They might. But what do you think most people would say, Jesse, if I said, where was the first official UFO sighting?
Roswell.
Exactly. In New Mexico, the 47th state in order of statehood in 47. So a lot of people don't realize this, but if They Live is true, by the way, Roddy Piper said They Live was a documentary. If you've never seen They Live, it's about, he gets the glasses and then he can see that certain people look like humans, but they're actually aliens. In that movie, by the way, the aliens say they'll have full control of the world by 2025. And poor Roddy Piper, that movie came out 201 days after his birthday, and then he died on the anniversary of Ignatius Loyola's death. Again, that's the founder of the Jesuits, whose name equals 201. But this is the kicker. A lot of people don't realize this, but both Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates started their technology companies. Again, sometimes I think technology is beyond the capabilities of man, but both of them started their technology companies in New Mexico, if you didn't realize this, and they both moved them up to Seattle. So both Amazon and Microsoft have their roots in New Mexico and went up to Seattle. And here's what's interesting. The word alien, when you run the alphabetic order in reverse, the word alien equals 94, like how Seattle, Washington equals 94 when you run the alphabetic order in reverse numerology. And again, Bill Gates was married on the first day of 94. I was talking about all the 94s with Bill Gates earlier. Bill Gates declared his decade of vaccines a decade before COVID, 94 days from his birthday. Anyway, the word alien is 94. So I was thinking about this. I think we're going to see, again, you're going to have to take care of yourself and hang around for a while to see if this prediction lands. But I really think the next huge phase of this alien agenda, it's going to come in the year 2041. And the reason why, the word alien is 41 when you run the alphabetic order forwards. It's 94 when you run it in reverse. So 94 years after 1947 is the year 2041. And the way these people work by numbers, keep in mind the word 40 or the year 47, the word time itself equals 47. Everything they do is a ritual in time. Again, the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn are 47 degrees apart. The Freemasons out of France keep the compass on their logo above the G at 47 degrees. France equals 47. Francis equals 47, like Vatican. We had the first Super Bowl this year on the Vatican's birthday, 47 points in the game. Government, authority, Republican, Democrat, president, White House, all of those words equal 47. The Masons study the 47th problem of Euclid. The Masons etch on the temple all his number. Again, I think aliens are one of their agendas because it's divisive. You know, religious people don't like it because it goes against what they learned from their spiritual teaching. You know, the Bible would no, this alien thing is not right. But yeah, I do think that it just lines up too well. 94 years after 1947, 2041, Alien 4194, Project Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam was published in 94. And so the other year, the Space Needle had that crazy light display for New Year's. You had to have on the glasses to see it. But part of me wonders, I'm like, God, I wonder if they'll be able to do that in the future without having to wear the glasses. Because, I mean, it looked like if you haven't seen the Seattle New Year's Eve display that they did in the sky from, God, it was probably 3 years ago now. It's crazy. Look that up. It'll blow your mind. So anyway.
Some people believe that this alien thing is going to happen in actually 2025. So we've interviewed a guy named Boyd Anderson who scored the 5 fastest goals in hockey history, and in juniors he scored 5 goals in 3 minutes and 7 seconds. So apparently that 5307 was a big, Illuminati number. So, he was brought to Dubai and they brought him in. He met all these people and he were telling him about Bitcoin. We're telling him about the gold, telling him about the gold heist on that airplane that they did. But they told him about in 2025 is apparently when they're going to do this fake alien invasion or whatever, right? So it's interesting how different people hear different things, and we're just trying to find the missing links and put the pieces of the puzzle here together from everybody's story. And I think that's one of the big things about this show is everybody's got a link, everybody's got a piece of the story, like your piece of the story, right, is piece of the story. We're just trying to figure out, because I think knowledge is power, and the more knowledge we all have collectively, then the less power they have over us.
Indeed. About that knowledge is power phrase, in English, that phrase knowledge is power equates to 201. And that's interesting because in Hebrew, what 201 pertains to is light. It has dual meaning. 201, it pertains to light in Hebrew, and it also pertains to the phrase enlighten. And of course, to the occult, knowledge is light. If you're enlightened, you have knowledge. That's also why the moon landing was July 20th, 1969, the 201st day of the year. Of course, Neil Alden Armstrong equals 201. The illuminated object in the sky on the 201st day of the year, when Order of Illuminati is 201. And of course, it happened in the time of Cancer, when the moon's ruled by Cancer. And it happened in the year 69, when the astrological symbol for Cancer looks like 69. But the 2025 prediction, that's not a bad thought. If this alien thing keeps building and building and building, the beginning of this year they started with the thing in Miami, but again, They Live, which is about aliens. In that film, it's the year 2025 where the aliens have full control over the world. For the person who asked the question, are aliens a hoax? Then, again, I don't like. You shouldn't ask. There's not really anyone you can ask in the world who can tell you definitively if aliens are real or not. You have to understand. I mean, I don't think any of us are like They Live people here right now, but again, I mean, we only have so much information, right? There's a theory about Anunnaki, that the Anunnaki are this alien race that came here and created us in their image, but made us dumber and slave-like. And I mean, is that true? Is it false? I don't know. I mean, sometimes it seems possible to me. I look at my fellow man and I'm like, what's wrong with them? Like, why do they got their slave muzzles on and getting their Pfizer jabs? Don't they know that slave muzzle doesn't do anything? And standing 6 feet apart, they're not catching on here with all the 6 feet apart everywhere, all the sixes everywhere. They don't even know that the Clade X, the first pandemic simulation, was 660 days. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with people. We're in the information age. There's all this knowledge and information out there. There's a million people trying to wake people up, and most people are just oblivious to all of it. And again, it rattles my mind that anybody would go out and get a shot from a company like Pfizer, the most sued company in the history of the world for wrongful death and injury, especially when they had to rush out the thing for a 99.9% survivable illness. It's harder for me to consider humanity an intelligent race when these types of things are happening. I don't feel like any intelligent person would have had a stance any different than, Jesse, I think you and I were on the exact same page during the time of the pandemic. There was no way we were complying with, you didn't see me anywhere with the slave muzzle on. I was out on the street of my town for 100 straight days before the jab even came out, warning people about what Bill Gates said in his 2010 TED Talk. Again, I'm not going to say it because it'll get your video struck and taken down, but everybody should know what Bill Gates, again, William Henry Gates, his full name, 201, main co-sponsor of Event 201. If you have still not watched his 2010 TED Talk, it's never been more relevant than today. But listen to what he said. It's about getting carbon emissions down to zero. And one point, he goes into a list of ways that we can reduce the population. He has a very specific quote, his number one way to reduce the population. He says, if we do a good job with blank, we can bring it down. And the clue is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Seattle is directly across the street from the world's biggest needle. But he talks about that. He talks about how gas prices need to be raised to $5 to $10 a gallon. And out here on the West Coast, it's very expensive. Gas has been steadily around $5. California's been more than that. Our gas price is almost back up to $5. It's been a lot higher than that in the past. It came down a little bit. It's almost back up to $5 a gallon now. And then the other big thing that Bill Gates talks about in the end of that TED Talk is he talks about how in Russia and Ukraine, they have all this spent nuclear energy fuel. Maybe I should finish off. Oh, we went over the 2-hour mark. Jesse, how much time do you have?
Much as time as we need. I don't have anywhere to go
a few
right
more
now.
minutes to talk about Russia, Ukraine real quick in light of Bill Gates' 2010 TED Talk. Okay, so Bill Gates right now has an experimental nuclear reactor that's being built in Wyoming. I don't know if they finished building this thing and started the experiment, but I know they've been working on it. If you look this up, what they've done is they've built a massive crater in the ground, and they've put in a container, and they're putting spent nuclear energy fuel that's already been used in there, and they're essentially setting it on fire with a lid on. And what Bill Gates claims is that these containers and this burning process will last 50 years. And one of these containers will generate enough power to power a city like Los Angeles for all 50 years, no problem. And he says it's a good thing to do because it uses the spent fuel, which now has no purpose, and it has all this energy capacity, and it puts off zero carbon emissions. So he says it's a great way to get to net zero. Now, the thing that bothers me is he put it in Wyoming where like all this natural, beautiful scenery is. It's like, well, what if it goes wrong? Is it going to shut down Yellowstone and Grand Tetons and all these parks forever? I mean, like, what out of all the places in the world you could have done this, you did it where the most beautiful scenery is? That seems wicked in itself, and he is a wicked man. And then the other thing is, do you recall the other year in Wyoming how part of Yellowstone got destroyed because they said there was a once in 1,000-year rain event? Do you remember that?
No, I'm in Canada, so I don't hear all the specifics. I didn't hear about that. No.
Okay, it was a couple of years ago. It was on June 13th, the day leaving 201 days left in the year, but crazy amount of rain at once that just caused all this flooding and destroyed a lot of land and property. And it's not far from where he's setting up his experimental reactor to save the world from climate change. And again, just the phrase alone, weather control equals 201. Funny enough. And just like how the first admitted act of weather warfare was on the Jesuit order's birthday back in 1952 on August 15th. And of course, JFK gave his weather control speech back in 61. But you had that happen in Wyoming recently. And, Gavin Newsom, the Jesuit governor in California, when he reversed his decision on closing all the nuclear stations in California, he reversed his decision on Devil Canyon, 201 days from his birthday. And, Gavin Newsom's, if anything happens to Slow Joe, watch out for Gavin. But that would be the worst sign for America. I'll make the revolution happen if Gavin Newsom's in there. My God, he will be the worst thing ever. He went to University of Santa Clara, Jesuit scumbag. But the Russia-Ukraine thing. Okay, so from Joe. All right, here's the right place to start. Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin met right before Russia-Ukraine broke out. And they met, of all days, they met on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th. And that happened to be exactly 201 days after the first ever Jesuit Ignatian year began. And then when the war broke out, it broke out in the Donbass region, which equals 201. And it matters that Catherine the Great is who saved the Jesuit order, the leader of Russia at the time. And she preserved the Jesuits with 201 Jesuit priests. That's what goes down in their own history. It was old 201 again. So the funny thing about Biden meeting with Putin on Pearl Harbor Day is that from the day that Joe Biden was born to the day that Hawaii became a state was 201 months later. And of course, we had that crazy thing happen to Hawaii this past year. Lahaina, the old capital, burned up. And then Slow Joe. I don't even think he's really slow. I think it's the character he plays, to be perfectly honest. It's Hollywood there in the Oval Office. But Joe Biden shows up in Hawaii, and let's not forget his wingman, Barack Obama, is supposedly from Hawaii. But he waited. Okay, for people who don't know, Hawaii was once overthrown by a political group in the U.S. called the Committee of 13, to go with the 13 stripes and, 13 colonies and 13 years of slave school like they do over here, K to 12. But the Committee of 13 is what overthrew Hawaii and eventually started the process of it becoming a state. So Joe Biden waited 13 days from the fires to show up, and he showed up on Hawaii's 64th birthday as a state. Now, Maui forwards and backwards equals 44 and 64, whereas Joe Biden forwards and backwards equals 64 and 44. And of course, he was wingman to number 44, Obama, who was elected 44 years after the Civil Rights Act, and he ran on Hope. Hope forwards is 44, forwards 64 in reverse. So this 44-64 thing fits in with Joe Biden, Obama, and Maui. But literally waited until the 64th birthday of the state to show up there and give his condolence speech. And here's where it gets creepy. There's a lot of, I could tell you a lot of things about Maui, but we'd be here for 5 more hours. But here's one to really think about. Hawaii was acquired by the U.S. for military strategic purposes, having to do with largely Japan. And Hawaii got burned up between the anniversaries of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In fact, the fire finished on August 9th, the anniversary of the Nagasaki bombing. Now, there was a hip-hop artist who's from Chicago, kind of like how Obama has that Chicago connection, who got famous at the same time as Obama, who has a song called has an album called 808 and Heartbreaks. I'm going to bring all this together. Obama and Kanye West is who I'm talking about. And of course, Kanye West, as he's running for president, he's become friends with Trump. Kanye recorded his album 808 and Heartbreak in Hawaii. And Hawaii was made the 808 area code on August 8th. And hip-hop music was born on the 808 drum machine that came out of Japan. And it was hip-hop's 50th anniversary. A common terminology in hip-hop is like, if people like the lyrics, that's fire. So for hip-hop's 50th anniversary week, the 50th state of Hawaii burns up starting on 8/8, the anniversary of the 808 drum machine, which again is from Japan, where we dropped the bombs, essentially military technology. Again, I'll let you think about it if you think all that's a coincidence. Then right after that, for hip-hop's 50th anniversary, then Magoo the rapper just drops dead at age 50 days later. That's how they do it. But there were a lot of things tied in with the Maui thing. The Dora the Explorer. It was like the anniversary of the conclusion of Dora the Explorer, and what they say it was the hurricane winds from Dora. And there was like one surviving. I'd have to go back and look at all my notes, man. There were so many crazy rituals with the Maui fire. The Rock had just it's bad right now because I haven't talked about it for months, but there was a live act. I think it's Moana. Moana, I think, is the Disney film, and then just days before the fire, The Rock had premiered the trailer for Moana. And it begins with an island just catching a fire. And in Moana, you have the fire god Maui. That's the character that The Rock plays. The Polynesian fire god Maui is the character in that movie. So they just put that out in Hollywood, the trailer of, this movie with Maui and Moana and the fire. It's just, I forget the rest of it, but there's a million more things. It was perfectly synced with The Rock's birthday. You know what it was? If I remember correctly, the fire was 127 days after The Rock's birthday, which again brings us back to Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 127. I'm doing a bad job at this week. Maybe something that kills me though is Hawaii was such a big deal what they did to Hawaii, and it was just like after a week, just like the media just buried that story and like everybody forgot about it. And there's, again, just like so many things. I mean, these people do horrible things in the world, but then they have another horrible thing, so people forget about it 5 seconds later. It's like, oh, I forgot about Hawaii because then this happened, and then this happened, and then now there's a huge war in Israel, and it's just like people can't keep everything straight. But if you pay attention, you can see this sick cabals just doing ritual after ritual after ritual, and they're always paying tribute to history. So anyway,
someone named opened up, said, talk about Dora Atwater Milken. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah,
do you know?
Yeah, so I was trying to remember that name. So there were so many things with Dora because it was the hurricane force winds of Dora is what spread the fire, they said, and then like it happened on the anniversary of Dora the Explorer ending, and then if you saw that picture of like the whole area was burned up, but there was one house that survived. They said the owner of that house was Dora Atwater Milliken, and I forget what the number significance is right now behind it here. Let me see if I can type it in here and refresh my memory. Dora Atwater Milliken equals 127. This 127 number was everywhere on this. Dora Milliken alone, without the middle name, is also 127. It's also 64, like Maui and Joe Biden, like how he showed up for the 64th birthday. And then the surname Milliken alone, it's with a double L, Millikin. Milliken alone is also 127. And I wish I could remember everything. I want to say Polynesia is 127, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Polynesia is 127 because the Polynesian fire god Maui, and just how it fit in with The Rock playing that character. I forget what The Rock's original name was in the WWE. He went by a different name before The Rock, and whatever I can't remember what it is, but whatever his original name was also 127.
Rocky Maivia.
He was huge in the ritual that they did in Maui.
Yeah, and they were begging for money with Oprah afterwards, begging people to give them money. That was horrific seeing him on TV with Oprah afterwards.
Oh, okay. I just remembered something else. When the Hawaii fire happened, the governor wasn't in charge of the state because he had stepped down to be traveling in there's so many things. Like I'm telling you, to go back to I was writing a book on this and I just gave up on it because everyone stopped talking about Hawaii. There was like zero interest in it. I was so annoyed. But the governor was like traveling in the states. So he put the next person in command, and the next person in command was Jesuit educated at the University of San Francisco. And the funny thing, okay, remember this fire in Maui happened August 8th and August 9th. August 9th is the day leaving 144 days left in the year, like Jesuit order. Ignatius of Loyola has the quote, "Go forth and set the world on fire." That quote with numerology applied is 144. So that fire ended on the day leaving 144 days left in the year. And do you recall a handful of years back, there was a massive fire in San Francisco on the pier?
I think I heard about that.
I got to go back and double check, but I just remember 144 was all over that fire as well. And we were making the same point and led the Jesuits and the connection with San Francisco and St. Francis of Assisi. But yeah, I should finish the book I started on Hawaii. It's just, again, I do this work to wake people up. And then when you're on a topic that all of a sudden nobody cares about anymore, it's like, well, I'm not going to wake people up with this, unfortunately. So it's so hard because they are always keeping our minds occupied with their latest tragedies, their latest agendas, their latest mind control. And I can't even think of one of my favorite authors' names right now for the person who said I have a good memory, but I love it. It's Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal said he called the United States of amnesia because nobody remembers anything past Monday. And as I've gotten older and been aware of that quote for so long in my life, I just see how true it is. So,
what's your thoughts of the Burning Man Festival and what that kind of Yeah, I think that was where everybody got hailed in or rained in, and everybody was stuck there.
Crazy amount of water at Burning Man, right? That was on September 4th, so that's that 9/4 thing. That was on the 247th day of the year, while both the Illuminati and the U.S. were 247 years old. And of course, at Burning Man, they have the big owls there. The Illuminati likes to use the owl as a symbol because the owl has very good vision in the dark. It's got the light in its eyes.
I actually heard that there was underground bunker underneath where they have the Burning Man. And
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just put out bad information. I read my notes wrong. Okay, let me just rewind. So the flood waters came September 1st. They waited to burn the man till on September 4th, the 247th day of the nation's age, again, while the Illuminati in the country are 247. This was the 38th event for Burning Man. And it's interesting because the word fire equals 38. They couldn't set the man on fire for the 38th event because of the torrential rains. And sorry, to go back to what you were saying. Oh, by the way, the word burn also equals 19, like how that date can be written 1/9. But to go back to what you were saying about the underground bunkers. Yeah, I'm interested, please.
Yeah, so apparently there's like underground bunkers, and so where people, because somehow people always go missing at Burning Man or people die and all that stuff. So it's almost like they're doing some kind of mind ritual sacrifices, CIA bunkers apparently, or something is underneath there. But what I found fascinating is if that is true and how it all got rained, I'm wondering if they got flooded and they got, rained in, or if it was potentially they did that on purpose, to flood them, and maybe they didn't have people in the bunkers at that time. So it's just interesting to think about that potential.
Sure, indeed. I don't know about that part, but I understand that the weather control is very real, and I get the joke of raining out the planned fire by the numbers, and then the day that they were finally able to set it back on fire was just totally symbolic. We talked a lot about 247 in rituals all throughout this last year, and that was one of them.
So with all this weather control that's been like, we've had Jim Lee on a few times. He's one of the, foremost experts on, plane farts and geoengineering and all that kind of stuff that I've ever heard. Talking about they've had, weather manipulation since the 1800s. He was actually showing articles in the late 1800s about this, right? And he was showed another article about, I think it was Lake Tahoe. And Lake Tahoe was like a plane laneway. And all of the engineering, all of the planes that creating all of this stuff that's blocking out the sun, they were like complaining about that. And he showed an article about what they said was, look, this is our laneway from the military. Move your town if you don't like it. It was like, this was posted, move your town if you don't like the stuff that we're putting up into the air. And if they have all this, like you said, Operation Popeye and China, not only did they have the snow, but they also guaranteed that there wasn't going to be any rain on the opening ceremonies. They talked about that they were going to, avert any potential clouds. There's, the rains in Dubai, or people can pay if you're going to have a wedding, you can pay some companies to not have rain come to ruin your big day and stuff like that. So if they have this, weather manipulation technologies for, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, who knows how many years, then when they do have like droughts, why don't they make it rain? When they do have fires, why don't they put out the fires? Why don't they just create this stuff? If they're going to do it anyways, why don't they do it to like, maybe like help situations instead of make them into disasters and make things worse for everybody.
Exactly. And I mean, that's what JFK was talking about back in 61, the advantages of this technology. And now all that's swept under the rug, and the media acts like weather control's this crazy idea, except for when they let you know what's happening for the Olympics. And yeah, I mean, that's the problem with people not being informed, because if everyone had this information, they'd realize how we're getting played. And again, people like us, all we can do is keep pushing and trying to get the information into people's hearts and minds, and it needs to get out there if we're going to change anything. So, if you want to look up this name, you're talking about back in the day. Here's a name you can look up: Charlie Hatfield, the Rainmaker. If you search that on YouTube, you'll find I forget if it was like Colorado News Network. Some local news even did like a 5-minute story on him, showing the old footage of how people would pay him to come into the town and bring rain to the town. And they called him the Rainmaker. And funny enough, the Rainmaker has that Gematria 201 like weather control.
So, do you know anything about last year in Alberta when the fires happened? Was at the same time Chuck the Turd was getting coronated, and it was almost like it was some kind of a fire sacrifice ritual to his coronation. And the interesting part about that is it happened just after everything melted from the snow. Like it was in like March or April, and like we like literally like 2 weeks before there was snow on the ground. So it didn't really make any sense how everything that just got melted everywhere could be so flammable, because you would think that the moisture from all the snow would, make everything, make it not burn the way it did. But that's when the fire started, and then we had the big fire problem last year.
Yes, that was a long ongoing story. I remember it was the 41st Canada Day that here in the States, the big focus began about how much Canadian smoke was pouring into the United States. We had it up here in Washington. It was like all across the northern part of the States. But the funny thing about them bringing attention to that on the 41st Canada Day is that USA, those three letters with the alphabetic order, adds up to 41. And 41 is the 13th prime number, going with us being the nation of 13 stripes and 13 colonies. And like I always say, 13 years of slave school, where they don't teach us about JFK's weather control speech back in 1961. I forget too, because it was a while back and there's just so many things. There was a lot of high ritual with that. And again, they're trying to cement the idea in everybody's head that there's this dramatic climate problem. They need carbon taxes, which will just, give them more control and power and wealth. And of course, you have you got the Jesuit up there right now. You got what's his face? What's your prime minister's name? His dad used to be the one.
Yeah,
Trudeau. Yeah, you got a Jesuit up in charge over there too. So,
and his second in charge, which some people believe is his handler, Freeland. Her dad was the Nazi newspaper from the German and the Nazis, and she's the one that's the deputy prime minister or whatever, the second in charge.
Yeah. It's the same thing all over this world. The people who are in control are all part of this cabal. And again, they work every day to just keep people in the dark and keep people afraid and believing in their agendas. I mean, that's the name of their game. They got to have you believe in all the agendas. The climate change thing, they want you to think that it's not that I agree that we could take a lot better care of the earth. That's not my argument over here. It's just that I know that they have this weather control and manipulation, and they're setting fires ritualistically and seemingly making storms worse, sometimes even overblowing storms. It's just like last year, they created this big scare in California for Hurricane Hillary on Bill Clinton's birthday, and then it was overblown. And, I remember, so my dad, he's remarried, and his wife's from Mexico City, and she's the only one from her family that lives here in the States. The rest of her family's in Mexico City. It was years ago now, but here in the States, they were reporting that there was like this crazy storm impacting like the Mexico City region, and just talking about climate change all on the news. And then from talking to his wife, she's like, yeah, my family's down there, and they're saying there's like nothing even out of the ordinary. And I'm like, is this news even happening in Mexico right now? Or is this just news, more climate change crap for us here in the States as part of the regularly scheduled programming tonight, just to keep putting the same narratives out there? And again, it is so easy for them to just make up stories and exaggerate things and just keep, for the sake of just pounding home the point until they finally get their way, until people cave in and say, all right, fine, carbon taxes, I'll pay even more. So
what's your thoughts when you hear that they say about signs and symbols rule the world?
Well, I think it's true, and I'd say the thing that needs to be fixed with that quote is numbers as well. I'd say the numbers are even more important. Again, they etch Allah's number on the temple. The fourth book of the Bible is not called signs or symbols; it's called numbers. But yeah, the signs and symbols are absolutely important. It's just that's what I see the whole truth community on, is like stuck on just the symbols and the celebrities doing the 666 fingers around their eye. It's like, okay, that's great. Yeah, I'm aware, but like, where does that take you? It only takes you so far. I just saw somebody in the chat said I forgot to talk a lot about a lot of things I meant to talk about, because I always do that because I'm so tangential. But I wanted to make the point about Kate on March 22nd coming out. Kate from the royal family coming out with her cancer story. Did you see that on 322?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been waiting for this day for many a years. I've been waiting for this day, March 22nd, 2024, since I first started this research. It was things I was talking about in the very beginning. Because I was always worried about the Georgia Guidestones. I forget how old I was. It was years after 9/11, just looking into things. Finally, I came across the Georgia Guidestones, and they just blew my mind. These huge 19-foot tall stone pillars, essentially a pledge from the New World Order to depopulate, to get the Earth's population down to 500 million. But what mattered about March 22nd, 2024 is it was the 44th anniversary of the Georgia Guidestones being unveiled. And of course, they came down the other year on Bush's birthday. Again, put up on 322. He was in order 322. It's not hard to see why they came down on his birthday. But the reason it mattered the 44th birthday of the Guidestones is because Georgia equals 44 in Gematria, like genocide. And the last line on the Georgia Guidestones, again, rule 1 is about why the Earth's population needs to be limited to 500 million. And then the 10th rule is be not a cancer on the Earth. And I've always pointed this out. In Gematria, cancer equals 44, like chemo, like kill. Cancer, chemo, kill. All 44. And for the record, Pfizer's 44. And again, Pfizer just bought that big cancer company, Seagen, on the anniversary of the COVID shot going live. And I won't even go down that route, but it's not an accident the day they bought Seagen, because we all know what those jabs are doing. But anyhow, you have Kate come out on the 44th anniversary. And then here's we started to get clever when we were thinking about this, because shout out to Nathan wherever he is. He was the one who first connected the dots, and then I looked into it. I said, he's dead on the money. So also the two big stories on March 22nd were Kate's cancer story, because everyone cares so much about the royal family who does everything by the numbers every single day if you just pay attention. R.I.P. Princess Diana, which equals 132, dead 132 days after the Queen's birthday, for one of a million examples. They had to coronate Charles on 5/6 when the last King of England died at 56. And of course, he's got cancer by the numbers too right now. But anyway, the other story on March 22nd was what happened in Russia at the concert hall. And the phrase skull and bones, again, they're order 322. Skull and bones equals 149, which is the alphabetic order. That attack on that concert hall was 149 days after the anniversary of its opening. Moscow, Russia is also 149. They said it was in the suburb of Moscow, and I forget what the name of the town is, something with a K. The actual name of that town's also 149. But again, Skull and Bones has the connection to the Templars. The Templar cross is in the Jesuit logo. Catherine the Great preserved the Jesuit order in Russia. And if you go back and look, Catherine the Great died in history on the 322nd day of the year, 322. And now you have Catherine, or Kate, from the royal family. Her actual name's Catherine. You got her coming out that day with her cancer thing. So then we started to look. Catherine the Great's birthday is May 2nd. So the ritual with Kate and the ritual with Russia were 41 days before Catherine the Great's birthday anniversary. Again, Skull and Bones equals 149 with the alphabetic order. With numerology applied, it equals 41, just like how Bush in Skull and Bones was number 41. And by the way, the guy who was supposed to perform at the concert, I don't know if you saw the Russian band that was supposed to perform. He came out and said he'd pay for everybody's funerals. That guy happens to be 68 years old right now. Go figure. I just, on their album, in light of Signs and Symbols, look up some of their album covers. They like the big all-seeing eye on the front of their album. Go figure that they were the ones that were supposed to perform. And by the way, the guy who sorry. A lot of people have pointed out that the movie Tenet that came out recently. Have you seen that movie Tenet?
No.
The director for that movie is the same director who did The Dark Knight Rises. Have you seen that movie, the Batman movie with the exploding football stadium where they show Section 322 right before it blows up?
No, I'm not too big in TV and movies. I see the ones here and there, but I just try to keep my temple as pure as possible.
Good for you. I watch these things so I can expose them, but again, it's the same director for both movies, and there's a big 3-2-2 in that catastrophe scene, and now this happens on March 22nd, and people have pointed out that the Tenet movie begins with a terrorist attack on a Russian concert hall, so there's a lot of parallels. Anyway, there's even more to this, but this is what they do. This is what people need to understand. Every day they do rituals, and these people are clever. With their rituals, they are paying tribute to history. They were paying tribute to Catherine the Great, who saved the Jesuit order. They were paying tribute to the Georgia Guidestones, which, by the way, the Georgia Guidestones came down 201 days after the Pope's birthday, again on Bush's birthday. And for the record, Paul Walker, who was in the movie The Skulls about Skull and Bones, which came out right before Bush won election in 2000, that movie came out 201 days after Paul Walker's birthday. Again, 201 relates to the Illuminati. Skull and Bones is related to the Templars, but also modeled after the Bavarian Illuminati. So, yeah, again, you guys, because of all of the medical experimentation, there's going to be a whole lot of new medical problems. We could talk about the pig organ headlines that are starting to come out. The first pig organ of this type's getting installed in a person. The first pig organ of this type's getting installed in a person. Check out the movie The God Committee with Kelsey Grammer. He's a doctor figuring out how to make genetically modified pig organs so that enough people can have organs for kidney transplants and heart transplants and all the things people need transplants for. From the day that movie came out called The God Committee to the day that the headline broke about the first person in the world getting a surgically installed genetically modified pig heart, do you want to guess how many days later it was?
185.
I give it not a bad guess. It was 201 days later.
201.
It was 201. And remember, Kelsey Grammer got famous from Frasier, set in Seattle, up where Bill Gates is. And, you know, after they started giving out the experimental jabs, there were some headlines put out in the UK and Australia about how there's going to be a new phantom heart disease over the next 5 years that's going to take a lot of lives. Right now, there's headlines about how cancer's popping up all over, and doctors are just dumbfounded. They don't know where all these new cancers are coming from in younger and younger people. They don't know why people's hearts are stopping. It's just so sick to sit back and look at this. It's like, okay, I guess we got to do something different if our doctors are this dumb, because a lot of us saw this coming before the jab was even out there. But anyway.
What's your thoughts about pigs being close to like human, or I guess, you know, man and women, because human is like monster if you look at it, but pig, and that's why, you know, maybe some, you know, scriptures say don't eat it. It was because it was like a mutation, I guess, between, you know, man and animal, and it's like a hybrid. It's not even like a real God created, you know, thing, and that's why, you know, they can do these transplants, because it's so related to, you know, actually our physiology.
Right. I mean, that's why some spiritual beliefs don't eat pig, because it's so similar to a human being. And I'm pretty sure that's part of the joke at George Orwell's Animal Farm. You know what? Something I might have done a bad job of in this interview is I didn't lay something down at the beginning. Again, the reason that they do this is Kabbalah. In Kabbalah's Book of Formation, it's stated in the opening paragraph of the Book for Formation, the very first paragraph, God created the world with numbers, letters, and words. And again, that pertains to Gematria. So these people are playing God by doing this every day, laying down these language-based rituals, contriving the news, the elections, the sports games. They're literally playing God over humanity. And they do use the Bible as the playbook, just like how in Revelation, you learn about the mark of the beast and 666, and you must have it if you want to buy or sell. Again, Cladex was the first pandemic simulation put on by the same people who did Event 201, and it was done 666 days, Cladex. It was May 15th, 2018, 2 years to the day of Operation Warp Speed. May 15th, by the way, is Mercurialia, Roman festival to celebrate Mercury, and we all know that's the suspect ingredient in a lot of jabs. Remember, in 2012, Google took down everybody's video questioning jabs and autism. Couldn't talk about that anymore. that was a big sign for me too, for why it was time to start speaking up, because I just saw how censorship was becoming a real thing. After Sandy Hook, there was a major push for censorship. By the way, the Sandy Hook was always compared to Dune Blaine, the Dune Blaine massacre, which got gun rights taken away in the UK. The Dune Blaine massacre, 201 months before Sandy Hook. They just did the joke with Aaron Rodgers this year on the anniversary of the Dune Blaine massacre, with the headlines about him being a Sandy Hook conspiracy theorist. Aaron Charles Rodgers, his full name equals 201. Made his name with the Packers, founded by the Jesuit Vince Lombardi, who died unexpectedly at Georgetown. Of course, Aaron Rodgers faked his injury this year playing in the 201 area code in New Jersey, across the river from the World Trade Centers that became 2 towers before they became 0, before they became 1. Again, the Holy Bible equals 201. Jewish mysticism equals 201. The Jesuit order equals 201. Knowledge is power, 201. This is the knowledge they're using every day to control the world. Again, it's Kabbalah. That's where the term the Cabal comes from. So, yeah, I explain all these things in the books I've written. I have 2 books that are out there, and someday I'll have a lot more once I finish all the ones I'm working on. But, yeah, I've explained it in both books, why they do this. And I just saw somebody left a comment. They're probably trolling. They said, I've been here for 2 hours and I haven't learned anything. Maybe if that's you, if you're serious, maybe rewind this video and watch again and tell me you didn't learn anything. You must really, I can't imagine watching this video and not have learned anything. What you learned in this video is what goes on every day and will go on for the rest of your life if it's not stopped.
And there's so much information here, and he's not a troll. He's comes to a lot of our interviews, and he's just really. But he was like, "What's the point of all this? I have been here for 2 hours. I haven't learned anything. For one, if you're not learning anything, that's probably not the best place to be, because there's a wealth of knowledge and that. But what is the point of like learning all this, figuring all of this stuff out? Is it to make people aware of the history? Is it to help predict what may happen in the future? A little bit of both. Like, what do you find the point of why you've gone so in depth into these numbers?
Well, again, when 9/11 happened, I knew it was a lie, and I wanted to figure out who was really behind it, who was really controlling the government. Like something I spotted around the time of 9/11 was just the election of Bush. I mean, before he was president, they were saying it was going to come down to Florida, where his brother was the governor. And then soon after, I realized his brother was the 43rd governor of the state. And then Bush became number 43, and his dad was the 43rd vice president. Lo and behold, in Gematria, Yale equals 43. So again, by learning this, I was able to follow the breadcrumbs back through history to say, all of this system was implemented in the 16th century when the Jesuits were created. And then lo and behold, you have founders who were warning about the Jesuits and what could happen if they came out of suppression to this nation that was being born. And the fact that the Jesuits had to be suppressed because of all of the political manipulation they had going on in Europe. And then, so from learning this, you can see, I call it the fake truth community. Most people are tuned into the fake truth community. They're listening to people who just say the same crap every day that's false. For all the people out there who think Zionist bankers run the world, the Rothschilds run the world, you hear everybody say this. You're wrong. They do not. You can prove it definitively. Nathan Rothschild, who just died, why don't you apply Gematria? Nathan Rothschild equals 87. The name of his bank equals 87. Oh, who's 87 years old right now? Oh, the Pope is 87. What does the Catholic Church equal? Oh, it equals 87. Again, what does Rothschild mean? It means red shield. Oh, who had red shields? Oh, the Templars, the military, the Catholic Church, the original bankers. Again, by learning this, you can see who established Israel on 14/5, when there's 145 more chapters in the Catholic Old Testament. And when you run the alphabetic order in reverse, you can see the Catholic equals 145. When you run it forwards, Catholic equals 71. The war in Israel just began 71 days from the Pope's birthday on Putin's 71st birthday. And people didn't get the joke of it beginning on Putin's birthday in the anniversary of us invading Afghanistan over Al-Qaeda. Because isn't it so that the CIA funded Osama bin Laden to interfere with the Russians or the Soviet Union in Afghanistan back in the 80s? Again, by learning all of this, you can understand who runs the CIA, why it was established in a 201 ritual. So this knowledge gives you the ability to see who's really running the world and not become one of the people going, oh, Rothschilds and Zionist bankers. It's not to say they don't have a hand in things. It's just that they don't run the show. We're on the Catholic Church's calendar. We're speaking their language. Literally every major ritual that goes down in this world is synced with the Pope and the Superior General. So by having these tools, I guarantee you there's nobody in the, and this is why other platforms who have 500,000 subscribers and all they talk about are Zionists and Rothschilds, and that's all it ever goes to. The Zionists, the Rothschilds. They're the same people who make fun of this work on occasion. Again, if they had me on to debate, they would get smoked. It wouldn't even be close. We'd run circles around them. We'd explain why. They'd be like, well, what about how on the Balfour Declaration it's addressed to dear Lord Rothschild? And I'd say, yeah. And then that same Rothschild that you're talking about, let's go back and look at his death. Oh, isn't that funny that he died on the 201st day of his age and state of Israel equals 201, like the Jesuit order who clearly set it up in a Catholic biblical ritual because of their planned ritual in Europe with the world wars? By the way, who did Hitler model the Nazis after? Oh, that's right. He modeled them after the Jesuit order. What's his name say on his birth certificate? Oh, it's Adolphus Hitler. Oh, that's funny because that equals 201. His actual name is 201. Huh? I wonder where this guy came from. And by the way, he went by Adolf Hitler, with which numerology equals 56. Like how he died in April, which equals 56, supposedly from suicide, but nobody found his body. And the formal title for the Jesuit Society of Jesus equals 56. And recently in history, we saw the takeover of the world during the pandemic, which began 56 years after Trump's Jesuit education began. And then you have Gavin Newsom, which equals 56, who locked down California as the first governor to do so, saying 56% of California will get coronavirus in 8 weeks, which is 56 days. And again, coronavirus equals 56, like COVID vaccine, like Gavin Newsom, like Anthony Fauci, like Cuomo, who was the 56th governor of New York. And then Seattle was the first city to lock down under the mayorship of Jenny Durkin, the 56th mayor of the city, who's also Jesuit educated. And then the next mayor who had a COVID case was Lori Lightfoot, who was the 56th mayor of Chicago, who has the same birthday as Obama, who won the 56th presidential election. Like Black Lives Matter equals 56. And you can see that Black Lives Matter is a total Jesuit psyop with parallels to the Black Panthers, who started all of their original meetings in Catholic churches. So again, the point of this knowledge is so that you can actually have a real handle and grasp on what's actually going on. And you're not going, well, Zionist bankers and Rothschilds are doing it all. Meanwhile, while in Israel, they're being made the biggest guinea pigs of the world, having to take the most jabs. So you just see how all these fake channels who keep saying the same thing, whose message never changes despite all the information, like, it's 2024. You must see that Israel doesn't run the world anymore. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to have the most jabs over there. Again, over here, it's about finding out what's really going on, who's really running the show, and how you can use this knowledge to predict the future. For the guy in the chat who said who's not a troll, sir, people don't like me because I'm not the nicest guy. What I could say about you just from your comment is you're exactly what the New World Order wants. They've created a populace of low IQ morons who can't put 2 and 2 together. And that's why they get away with the obvious agendas that they do. You know, like 9/11, you had to be a total moron to be fooled by 9/11 for a second. You know why the whole nation was? Because it's a nation of morons. You know why it's a nation of morons? Because we've been chemically dumbed down with the food. We've been dumbed down with the slave school education, where they teach you that a man who sailed over from Europe, paid for by the Vatican, discovered a land where people already lived. Again, they know that they've made you a dum-dum with the religions that they drop on your head. You know, the nonsensical beliefs that make absolutely zero sense, but are all based in fear. Believe this or else. Believe this or live in the eternal hellfire after you die. Everything they do is fear-based and dumb, but people fall for it because they've been cultivated this way. And again, the stuff I'm teaching you, you can use it to take advantage of the rigged stock market. You can take advantage of it with things like Bitcoin. I mean, I told everybody, I said, once Bitcoin hits 72,000 on the 72nd day of the year, which is exactly what it did, I said, watch, it'll drop after that. So it'll be a good time to take out your profits. And had you done that, you could have taken out your profits. You could have watched it drop right down to 60,000. And then it started to get some resistance and go back up. You could have bought back in right there. And now it's shooting back up. Again, with this knowledge, you can learn to play the game at a whole new level. You can take advantage of the rigged sports games. You can take advantage of the market. You can take advantage of Bitcoin. You can not get manipulated by the news. So I just can't imagine being the person who's here and like, I've been here for 2 hours, never learned anything. you, sir, or ma'am, or whoever you are what's wrong with the world. And that's the big problem. I ran about that more than anything, because the one thing that I have it out for more than the Illuminati is how dumb the populace is. That's part of the reason this work hasn't taken over the world in the last decade. It's because most people are, like when you were a child and you went to the fair and you're like, damn, maybe next summer I'll be tall enough to ride the ride. The problem is, in this world, most people just don't have enough IQ points to grasp what I'm saying, which is literally elementary, and it's a major problem. So anyway,
I needed to share a few things. Someone asked why the comments that are popping up here I don't see. We're live right now on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and Rumble. And then we get uploaded to BitChute, Telegram, and Odyssey. And then Dollar Vigilante TV picked up our show as well. So we're just trying to get out to as many platforms. So when you see somebody's comment from a different platform, like if it's red here, it's a YouTube person commenting. And if it's a blue, it's a Facebook commenting. If there's no color, it's a Rumble commenting, because Rumble doesn't have it connected. But we have here, we have Laura. She asked a question, and I just wanted to scroll back to it about the Bible. Why is the Bible involved in a negative way? She said, hang on, a couple more things. She said, I believe the Bible is God ordained by the work of the Holy Spirit. And, I think that they're using it as a playbook personally, but, what's your answer to that?
So here, I'm going to answer a question, but they do use the Bible as a playbook. Case in point, again, Clade X, the pandemic simulation, the first one they did was 666 days before they declared the pandemic, from May 15, 2018 to March 11, 2020, 666 days later. Again, you must have the mark 666 if you want to buy or sell. A lot of people found that problem. They had to put their mask on, which is one letter off from mark, and then they also had to get the jab if they wanted to buy or sell or keep their job or go to school. All kinds of people ran into this. So obvious biblical ritual. And keep in mind, the word revelation equals 121. And it was January 21st, 121, that the first case of COVID was confirmed in the U.S. And then if you had Sirius XM, they made the 24/7 COVID channel 121. There were so many revelation themes. But event 201 was on 10/18. Now, what verse in the Bible is it that Satan comes to earth? Oh, that's right. It's Luke 10:18. So again, Clade X and Event 201 put on by the same people. And by the way, one of the main sponsors also of both those simulations was the Johns Hopkins, which is founded by the Skull and Bones member Daniel Coit Gilman. And again, the Skull and Bones, Templars, Masonic Order, numbers Order 322. By the way, just recently they had that Preparing for Disease X. That was exactly 201 weeks after the pandemic was declared for another 201. That was the World Economic Forum, again, put on by the Jesuit Klaus Schwab. But again, the Bible. Listen, I'm not going to tell you what to believe, okay? Here's my opinion, though. God doesn't make books. God doesn't write books, okay? Everything you know about the Bible and what's in your head about the Bible, that came from you reading something made by a man and what all your peers and adults and the people around you told you to believe. And listen, here, pretend religion never existed. Take a look around at people. What can you observe about people's behavior? Do you see the herd mentality? Do you see how easily they're led astray? Do you see how easily they're made fearful? Do you see how fear controls them? Because it was very obvious after 9/11 happened. It was very obvious during the time of COVID. Now, again, I was raised in the church. I was raised Lutheran. It's, again, Lutheran is named after Martin Luther. Isn't it funny that a young Lutheran would end up being like maybe the greatest threat to the Jesuits in the history of the world? I mean, the information we're dropping could easily make that argument. But the thing is religion. If I talk to a religious person long enough, I can get them all to admit that pretty much their entire religious belief boils down to one thing. This is true for Christians. Actually, this isn't true for all religious people, but definitely true for Christians. Every Christian, when you boil it down, the reason they believe what they do is out of fear. It's out of fear that they will not get the eternal afterlife if they don't believe. And that's it. and you actually start to think about that. That's why so many Christians, listen, you can't tell me nothing. I was the sweetest little kid in confirmation class when I got kicked out, and the other kids in there were all frauds and phonies that just did whatever the Sunday school teacher said so they could pass the class, and their parents wouldn't spank them when they came home. I got kicked out of confirmation as a 12-year-old for asking too many questions, and that told me all I needed to know about religion. I wasn't being rude. I was asking legitimate questions. God, did you just see what they did the other day with that guy setting himself on fire from Texas, and his name was Aaron? When Moses talked to the burning bush, his name was Aaron Bushnell, and then the next day Texas is on fire. People don't even get these jokes, man. It's sick. Aaron Bushnell sets himself on fire. The brother Moses saw the burning bush. His brother's Aaron. People don't even get it. Anyway, that just speaks to the point about how they use the Bible like a playbook. But religion is all fear-based, and it's all believing what the authorities told you. And that's why the original governorship of Europe was the Catholic Church. You just see a straight line from just religion, indoctrinating people from a young age to believe authorities, or else there'll be consequences, from religion to what the government does. So again, I preach against religion. Religion is the foundation of everything wrong in the world. Okay? It gets people to believe nonsensical things. And again, get offended all you like, Christians. But I really just want you to think. Do you really think God's master plan is to send his mortal son to earth to die for your sins? Like, what kind of master plan is that? Like, seriously, what kind of master plan is that? And your job is just to believe in this story from thousands of years ago. That's the most important thing you can do, is believe in this story from thousands of years ago. Like, how? How about think about this with religion and government? How come the only organization in the U.S. that's tax exempt are churches? Isn't that weird to you? Why don't churches have to pay taxes? You start to see how all of these things are connected and how they control the whole thing. You know, religion, government. There's a fine line between them, and they are the things that are really holding humanity down. You know, the word re as a prefix is often used and like to hold back, kind of like retard, religion. And again, I mean, most religious people, you know, I haven't met too many religious people in my lifetime that I thought were very intelligent people. Again, religion is a thing forced on us. And by the way, like, what kills me is just like looking at all the Latin Catholics. It's like my dad's wife is the sweetest lady from Mexico City. She's just a devout Catholic. She's got like 5,000 pictures of Mary around their house and crucifixes everywhere. But it's like, dude, the Catholic Church came to your continent and slaughtered your ancestors. So you're just going to submit and take their book and their religion? I mean, what is that? I mean, what is that in terms of a historical timeline? Is that cowardice? And it probably is. Because it was probably the survivors were the people who said, I won't bow down to your religion. Or not, excuse me, the people who didn't survive are the ones who said, I won't bow down to your religion. The people who survived are the ones who are like, okay, I'm Catholic. Yeah, here, I'm Catholic. Give me a rosary. Give me a crucifix. Here, don't kill me. Again, it's just, religion, in my opinion, is total trash. These stories are all stupid. They keep people fighting and divided. It's part of the cabal's game. And that's why they use they know the text better than anybody. They're the ones that mass printed it. They're the ones that took out the books they didn't want in there. And again, just all the games they play. All the games they play. In the 90s, one of the most famous deaths of the 90s was Tupac Shakur. When does Tupac die? He dies on Caesar Borgia's birthday, where white Jesus comes from. Son of the Pope, Caesar Borgia, who white Jesus is modeled after. Then they put up Tupac on the Cross album, Machiavelli, with the hit song Hail Mary. They put it out on Remember the 5th of November, Jesuit Guy Fawkes Day. By the way, in Gematria, Tupac equals 74, like his alias Machiavelli, like Jesus, like cross, like Messiah, like gospel, like parables, like killing. So, and by the way, you look at his record label, Interscope. Who runs Interscope? Oh, 2 devout Catholics. Oh, go figure. And I can say a lot more about it. It's perfectly synced with both of their birthdays when he died. But yeah, this is what religion is. It's a mockery. It's a mockery. And again, and why does everyone have white Jesus up in their house? Have you read your own Bible? I mean, it's Revelation 1:14 through 15. He has dark skin and hair like wool. So
did you hear about
white Jesus everywhere?
Did you hear about what Russia and Putin just unveiled?
What's that?
Black Jesus. They have all these historical accounts and all these paintings and because back then everyone was dark skinned, right? Out in the sun. It's all come from that area, it was dark skinned. So Putin just released a whole bunch of hidden things, all portraits, pictures, stuff from thousands of years ago. And it's all of them were dark skinned.
Well, that's interesting. Putin just had his very Jesuit ritual with Tucker Carlson, where they did the interview that broke the internet for a minute. And again, if anyone watched that interview, it's funny. Nobody talked about how he began. He began by talking about how it all goes back to the history of the Catholic Church in that part of the world for what's going on today. So yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that about Putin and the Black Jesus thing. But yeah, it's amazing. You have all these religious people who've never even read their own book, and did you just see that Candace Owens got fired from the Daily Wire this past Friday on March 22nd? Okay, so they have Ben Shapiro on there, right? He's the famous guy on the Daily Wire, little nasally guy, major BSer. But
yeah, I go hard on him when I hear him make these posts about what happened on October 7th there. I've been going hard on him on social media.
I have a feeling the video I did on Candace Owens firing is going to get me a strike. But whatever.
Just put it on private.
I'm not going to put it on private. They can give me a strike if they want to. But because all I'm doing is talking facts. You know a phrase that you're not allowed to use on Elon Musk's... Again, for real, no, Elon Musk is a major Jesuit puppet. He was declared the world's richest man for the first time in history on the anniversary of Nikola Tesla's death, on the 78th anniversary when both Tesla and Jesuit are 78. I could go on about Elon Musk, the little puppet, all day. But you're not allowed to use the phrase "the synagogue of Satan" on X anymore. Did you know that? You can't write that out. It's anti-Semitism.
Wow.
I've gotten so much censorship ever since he took over that platform. That's why it's just so Orwellian for him to be some champion of free speech. There is 10 times more censorship on X than there was before he had it. You cannot use the phrase "the synagogue of Satan." I encourage anyone to try it right now. You'll see how your post gets blocked. But I always teach about this. With the alphabetic order forwards, the synagogue of Satan equals 223. And with the alphabetic order in reverse, Philadelphia equals 223. And again, in the Revelation 3:7, the letters written to the Church of Philadelphia about the synagogue of Satan, which are those who claim to be Jews but are not, but are liars. And again, 223 is the number. March 22nd can be written 22/3. So the Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro fires Candace Owens, who's black, on that day. Well, if you want to do your research on the Old Testament, look into the book of Enoch, because in the book of Enoch, it's revealed that Methuselah is black. That's taken out of the Bible, but it's still in the book of Enoch. So Methuselah, the oldest Jew in the Old Testament, is black. Think about it. That means the Jews are black, and that means the Hebrew Israelites out renting on the corner have a point. So a black woman gets fired. Think about it. On 223, on Ben Shapiro's network, you could essentially call it. He's the false one. You see what I mean? And she's fired for anti-Semitism. When they fired that Harvard dean for anti-Semitism, she was fired 151 days after her birthday. Anti-Semitism in Gematria is 151. So anyway, you know what? My dad's waiting on me. He needs me to help him out with something, and I told him I'd be done around 3. I realize it's after 4 out here, and I got to help him out and get him to a spot that closes by 5. So I better wrap this up, Jesse. But again, I really appreciate you having me on, and there's always more to talk about if you want me to come back soon. And maybe that one guy who said he didn't learn anything in 2 hours, maybe he just needs another 2 hours of live streaming to catch on here. So,
and it's planting seeds. As much as some people don't get it, if they're listening to the information, at least seeds are being planted, and maybe one day they'll have the aha moment, how things will relate on one of those seeds that planted. And as long as one person benefits from the energy that we're putting into this, then it makes it all worth it. And we have over 200 people here right now, so thanks for everybody. And I just wanted to say to our mods, I just started giving out mods, and Please don't block anybody. I can do that. I can handle that. I don't like, people to have that, power over other people and not like it. I'm watching everything. So if I think anybody needs to be blocked, then I will do that myself. But, thanks for looking out. May the source be with you in all that you do. Protection around you during this pivotal time in history, Zach. And thanks again for sharing all this information. And I'll be in touch about another date because, I really enjoy, listening to all the stuff that you got in your head, man. You seem to pack a lot of knowledge in there.
Yeah, I forget more than I remember, but I mean, there's just so much to keep straight. And by the way, for all my people here who are subs, make sure you give Jesse a sub because he's doing great interviews all the time. So stay tuned to this channel.
Okay, well, thanks again. And, say hi to your dad. Give him a big hug from all of us here at The Missing Link. And you have an awesome afternoon. And thanks again. Thanks,
Sounds
everybody. Good. Thanks, everybody, for all your likes, comments, hearts, shares, and stars. We appreciate all of your love and support, however that may be. Thank you to... we don't get many of these, but Joseph Aquiviva 222.
Oh man, see, I got to comment on this guy. That was nice of you to donate $5 to him. He's a dedicated troll of mine, so who knows what he's doing. But here's the sad thing about that guy: he learned the knowledge from me, and then he uses the knowledge to decode me and tell, he tries to do decodes of me and tell everybody that I'm a shill. And just a shameful and another religious character too. And that's just what I mean about religious people. They're usually the biggest snakes in the grass. So anyway,
well, people tend to emulate the God that they believe in, and in the Bible they portray God as this homicidal maniac that wants to have firstborns killed and send bear to maul children because they laughed. And there's a lot of things that I don't align with, but there's a lot of beautiful stories in there as well. A lot of stories, and I think they have to mix in the truth with some of this other craziness to get people emulating this insane type of God that thinks that that people need to be punished for just laughing and stuff like that. But thanks, Joseph, for the $5. Thanks, Vivian C, for the $4.99. DJ says greatest show, Jesse. That was like maybe an hour ago. Great stream. Thanks for having Zach on. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of that. Thank you, everybody, for that. We appreciate that. And tomorrow we have on The Missing Link is Christine Wenz. So she's from Europe, talks a lot about astrology, what's happening in the stars, and different things about going on that. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Zach. We'll be in touch, and you have an awesome afternoon wherever you are. Knowledge is power. The more knowledge we all have, the less power they have over us. So, exactly. We'll see you next time. We see you back here on The Missing Link, and good work, Zach. We'll see you on your show. Always love your knowledge.
Thanks again, Jesse, and have a good day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to share it with your friends and family. And for all you religious people, don't let me offend you. Believe what you want to believe. Again, I do think spirituality is important. I just think I think every religion can just be boiled down to the golden rule. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. But I'm not sure about the whole turn the other cheek thing. That's another problem I have with Christianity. We'll save that for another stream. I think that's the problem with society, turning the other cheek too much. Sometimes you got to revolt, like Thomas Jefferson said. So anyway, thanks again, Jesse. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. And with the part about Jesus, he's told people, that you do not need religion in order to connect directly with the Father, connect directly with source energy. And then people turn to religion out of that because of the Catholic Church. When they say all roads lead to Rome, but they say Rome fell, it never fell. It just became the Catholic Church.